I think we're live. Evening, all from the UK. Good morning / afternoon. Those of you tuning from the States, and let me know if you're tuning from somewhere else. I know we normally have people from Sweden, Germany. Let me know in the chat where you're streaming in from. I've started a bit early. It's not scheduled to start till 5 past, but don't worry, I'm not going to start any of the content till then. Just thought I'd connect, since the first one that we had scheduled was supposed to start at 8 o'clock, but you all found your way here, so hopefully that linking you here wasn't so difficult. That's why I've opened it early. Yeah, so that's why I opened it up early, so that everyone could filter in at the correct time. But we will start the content in a little bit. I'm just keeping an eye on that other live stream, which I'll just keep going with the links open. Yeah, I think everyone will find their way here. Shouldn't be too difficult. I hope. We're doing good at the moment. We've got over 20 people in. So yeah, good day to all. I think we're gonna have a good crowd. Last time we had our esteemed guest, Professor Manu Ampim, on. We had an amazing live stream. It was certainly very informative. We discussed a lot, and I think we had a lot of eye-opening revelations in terms of what's taking place in Egypt and Sudan region at the moment, and how historically the region has been treated and how it continues to be treated to present day. So it was very, very eye-opening. RJ McKenzie said the last live was lit. If you was at the last live, give me a little shout out, tell me what you thought of it. And also I've already said, if you're in here and you're tuning from somewhere interesting, so UK and US don't apply. If you're tuning in from somewhere interesting, let us know where you're tuning in from. Now, we do have a question on the screen. Received a super chat before the live stream even started from Jonathan, who's always providing something, be it knowledge or some kind of a gift. So really appreciate the $10 donation. And he's asked me to ask you about Rameses the First's nose. Now, I'm not sure if he wants us to speak on the mummy or if he wants us to speak on the Turin statue, because I guess both of them have slightly, well, the mummy's nose, I've got my own theory about, and I'll leave you to kind of explain what you think about the mummy itself. But I know the Turin statue, that one has a few question marks, because out of all of the sculptures of Rameses, that one seems to have a abnormally narrow nose. Do you know which one I'm referring to when I say the Turin statue, Professor?
No, not offhand. I would have to see it. Even though I know that collection very well, I haven't looked at it.
Let me see if I can pull it up. I think it's the Turin one that really is the only one that I find quite dubious. I hope I've got that right. Rameses. Yeah, it is this one. I think this is the one that's known as the Turin statue. Let me see if I can. If I full screen it here, open this in a new tab. Boom. Okay, and then I think I should be able to steal the screen without losing yours and being able to get it back. I'm going to see, because it should just put it up as an additional. This could go well, or I could just ruin all of our hard work setting this up. I hope that won't be the case. I don't think it will be. There you go. Yeah, it's just another option. So I'll pull yours back in a moment. Okay. So this is the Turin statue. Are you familiar with this one?
I am.
Yeah. So this one is the I guess the one that raises the question marks, because it is in terms of his other depictions, and I'm sure you're familiar with his other depictions, like the colossal bust, that has a very so if I say Rameses colossal, can I spell colossal? Colossal bust, British Museum, Rameses. If we look at the nose on the colossal bust in the British Museum, we could take any of these angles here. This is probably a better one. We can see we've got a much different nose in comparison to this one.
Right.
And so when I did the reconstruction of Rameses, I was able to use pretty much all of his depictions apart from this one because it wasn't consistent. So that was, I don't know if that's actually, it would be nice to hear from Jonathan if that's what he was referring to or if he was referring to the mummy. But those are my thoughts. So I haven't formulated a conclusion about tampering or whatever. I just said it was inconsistent, so I couldn't use it. But it would be interesting to hear your feedback on this.
Yeah, well, here's what, and this would take an entire program. So on the De-Africanization that takes place. So today we'll focus on forgeries, but the De-Africanization is broad, it's deep, and it's wide. So I studied over 1 million artifacts when I lived in Europe in 89 and 1990. And what's very clear is that there's a systematic and sick reconstruction and shaving off of the bridge of the nose, as well as many statues, a very large number of statues, they get a nose lift. So what the modern conspirators do is they take a chisel or some kind of object to shave the bottom of the nose near the nostril to give it a nose lift so it looks thinner. And the only way to see that and to know that is not what most people do, which is a casual walk by. Oh, that's interesting. Take a look at the placard or the explanation and move on. No. It takes a long time because you really have to have the eye of an optometrist to look at where the rough parts of the noses are. So in every museum, in every room, there's been the De-Africanization whereby the noses have been reshaped, recarved. The bridge of the noses are shaved on each side, and there's always a nose lift. So this is so extensive that people wouldn't believe how much of it's done because sometimes it's crude, clumsy, and incompetent. Other times it's very, very subtle. And the only way you know that the bridge of the nose has been shaved is you actually have to look under. You have to stoop down and look underneath the statue to see how the bridge of the nose and the under part of the nose, how it actually looks in comparison to the rest of the nasal area. And there's always telltale signs of modern conspirators because you'll see the face being very smooth, but then bridge of the nose very rough. And you cannot see it with just a casual view of it. You have to really take time and get the right angle. And in certain collections, there is it helps because they have lights on the ceiling or they have floodlights that allow you to see the shiny, smooth finish that was done in antiquity, and then you can see the rough part to shave down the bridge of the nose, or shave down the nostrils, and then again, as I said, to give it a nose lift. And this is done systematically. So what I intended to do is that because this is so detailed, is to take a whole program if we do another program on this, brother, because
let's do that.
Because it will, not only can you see it, but see, like when you see noses that have been reshaped, recarved, or de-Africanized, it's usually a different color as well because they've been tampering with and changing and altering the nose. And there's the color scheme is very curious, as well as the fact that the modern conspirators, they actually it's a relief. They actually recarved the noses, and you can see the original nose shape and the recarved nose that gives it a pointy appearance.
Yeah,
And
I've got an
so,
example of that just on the screen.
yes,
Um,
exactly.
did you see? Yeah, did you see my live stream? These are in the Louvre. So these are
Yeah,
Ptolemaic, by the way, as well. So it's not like you're gonna get a whole bunch of Africans demanding that then they're Ptolemaic era. We kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to write that era off. But it didn't stop them. Two of these kind of Sphinx statues, both of them with false noses, and they've been very intricate about replacing the nose here. I mean, you can imagine it must have been painstaking to chisel this and to match the shape of the missing nose. That's not an easy process. I could tell you that now, because we're not even talking. There's not barely any filler here, so someone's really taken the time to put these two false noses in, where the material just clearly is a different material. It's just like, was it even? It was indisputable that this is a newly carved nose, and that this was, naturally eroded kind of statue. So sorry, I just wanted to substantiate exactly what you were saying there with these images that I took.
yes, and that's done in every collection around the world. It's the same thing. It's a systematic
Mm,
attack on the noses, the lips, and also
mm,
the eye color as well. And
mm.
and in many cases, the original inlaid eyes are taken out and they put in modern eyes. You can see the microscopic chipping around the eyes. So that's
Wow.
a more uh, detailed assessment that needs to be known, because what's obvious to a lot of people, and they
Mm,
ask the same question, hey, Professor, why are there so many statues with noses missing? I say,
mm,
good observation, but understand that's the most obvious thing, but there are
mm,
far more noses that have been reshaped and
mm,
recarved than are knocked off. It's just that people don't see that because they're not looking for it. And even if you are looking for it, they take, I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours to reshape and recarve, or what I call the De-Africanization process, that is hard to detect unless
mm,
one is spending a lot of time. I might be in a room, for example, for hours just looking at a few statues, because it's not just the
mm,
obvious, it's the entire gamut of these schemes and by the way, this has been done, the reshaping, recarving of noses, the changing of the width of the lips, the erasing of the paint colors. That has been
mm.
done since the 19th century, which is the age of fakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when people see that, they will have one aha moment after another to say, "Damn!" So yeah, exactly. This is how pathological this attack is on
Mm,
African identity and contributions to humanity.
mm. And in addition to that, I speak a lot about this channel about the recoloring as well. So one of the things they like to do is erase the original color, but then they like to reinforce the blacks around the eyelids and the blacks of the hair to make it look like the new kind of sandblasted skin color. The limestone was the deliberate target color that the Egyptians were after.
Exactly.
And also, yeah, sometimes it's a case of where they won't actually erase anything; they'll just retouch certain parts. You see this with the a good example of this is the what's it called, where it's really young bust of Tut, the Nefertiti, head of Nefertiti. That's a really good example of where they've, rather than going in there and actually doing a complete erasure, what they do instead is they will touch up certain parts of it. They do it on the canopic jars as well, where they will just touch up certain parts to make it look like that is the target color. And you can see it's been very haphazardly kind of like touched up. So if you just look at the head of Nefertiti here, where they've re-blacked, you can see around the eyes, and that makes it look like that faded color is the target color. So it's very, very deliberate to just, reintroduce the blacks, and therefore now that red skin, which is clearly faded and not the deliberate target color, becomes the target color, and it looks like you had red or pale red skinned Egyptians, which you didn't, or at least not in the artwork, I would say.
Yeah, that's part of the de-Africanization process, and
Mm,
it's a systematic attack on all images, whether they are statues or reliefs, and it's done at every museum collection, and it's
mm,
also done extensively in the field as we speak, at temple sites, tomb sites, through many places in the country. So there's a systematic, angry, pathological attack on the images. So it's a de-Africanization process that goes back to the 19th century, but it continues. And so the culprits are known. I've been able to identify and document who these ongoing culprits and criminals are as they attempt to rewrite the history of African contributions to humanity.
Can I just touch on this comment left by Ra as well over here? And he says Rameses looks East African Somali type, and I'm guessing he's talking about this statue, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But I guess the issue that I have is not, because those of you who've been on this channel for a long time, we know we always talk about the depth and the breadth of African phenotypic diversity, and I'm certainly not one that's put off by features like narrow noses and thin lips. Hopefully I've spent a long time trying to share the knowledge and the education that many Africans bear those lips. Even the great Sheikh Anta Diop, okay, had very, very thin lips. Robert Mugabe. These are all features that we have in Africa in spades. So I'm definitely not trying to associate certain features as being non-African. My issue with this bust is that it was not consistent. So my issue always will go down to consistency. If I'm looking at several busts of Rameses and they are very consistent. So he's got another colossal head that I believe is in Luxor that looks exactly like this head.
But if you show, brother Andrew, if you show a close-up of the previous one, if you show it as close as possible.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you take a look at this, what's subtle about it, and this is why I would have to make a case to show the more obvious patterns, and then the patterns that are the same but a little bit more subtle, so people can see the wide scale of it. But if you look at the nostrils, and here's what is not known or so obvious, is that you see the nostrils, it just kind of looks like it's, kind of a whitish color. And that's a good close-up. That's been dug out. That's been sanded a little bit. This is a more subtle nose job. It's not as obvious as some of the other ones, but if it was a clean finish as it was in antiquity, those nostrils would not be white. It's white because of the modern tampering and sanding. That's why it's white like that. If it wasn't white, it would be as dark as the rest of the nose, because the sculptures were at their best when they were carving images for antiquity. This does not look like that until if I had a pattern to show 10, 15, 20 different examples, then it would be pretty obvious what's done in these kind of cases. So that's why it's best to look at the entire process, because you have to really be there in person also and zoom in with the best lens, because when people are taking photos, they're not necessarily looking for what I'm describing. So the microscopic details that an optometrist would look at, they go missing. So I have extreme close-ups of this and other statues. So that's what happened here. It's some nose work that's clearly been done, and the nostrils is the most obvious thing that can be seen from this angle. But they weren't as angry as they typically are in the vast number of issues. You can tell that there's anger. Here is not the same kind of anger, but there is some subtle tampering. And folks, the way you would do that, and the way I do that as a researcher, you get the original excavation photographs. You look at the original photographs, the in situ photographs that this image was supposedly excavated in. Then you look at the original photographs when the museum acquired it, and then you compare it to how it looks today. And then you read the written reports to be able to make the assessment on it. And it's statue by statue. And I have a couple that I'll show today, but when we focus on this in particular, I'll have a pretty good range of these kind of things, and people can see the pattern. And it would be shocking that people are that pathological that they would spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to change images.
Well, I think on that note, now's as good a time as any to probably hand over to you. That was probably a nice little icebreaker we did there. So thank you for that, Jonathan. You kind of led he said, my bad, Horemheb in Vienna. I'm gonna check that out, Jonathan, but we're not gonna do it right now because I want to hand over to Professor Ampim and allow him to basically take the floor. He's got a presentation that he's prepared for the channel, and he's going to take us through. You can see the theme is modern fraud. Let me just quickly put you back on the stage. There we go. It worked. Yahoo. Okay. Yeah. So the theme here is modern fraud, and he's prepared something for the channel and for you guys as an audience. So I want to give him as much time as possible to be able to walk us through. We shouldn't have any of those technical issues that we had in the previous stream. I think we're going to be absolutely all good. And yeah, I'll kind of be in the back, but I'm going to hand over to you now, Professor.
Yes, sir. Okay, I appreciate it. Well, I just want to take a few minutes here. I am sharing as briefly as I can about forgeries, because this is one of the things that the modern conspirators have specialized in, and that is inventing fake and phony statues that did not exist in antiquity, which is very different than the authentic statues that have been de-Africanized and changed and altered so that it appears to be non-African. So I want to just share some of the more prominent forgeries and what the motivation is for it. But the reason why this is a thing in the first place is the fact that we're talking about Africa, and we're talking about contributions on a monumental scale. So this is why the 19th century is the age of fakes. So after the Rosetta Stone was found in 1799 by the French, and the French in 1799, when the Rosetta Stone, which is now in the British Museum, when that was finally deciphered by 1822, there was a rush to get artifacts and to sell them. So the motivation to get artifacts and to own them, find them, was commercial, but it also was racial at the same time. And that's why the 19th century, getting in the 1820s, became a time period to deal with making money and also attempting to misrepresent the race and identity of the people. I'm showing this here, Heru Amakhet, because this is the greatest statue on earth. It's the most well-known and most famous statue in the history of humanity. So when people talk about the Sphinx, which is a Greek term, the real word is Heru Amakhet. It means the god Heru in the horizon. And this great monument faces east, so that when the sun rises, it kisses the sun. And so this is at Giza, and it's in front of the middle pyramid. This is the greatest statue on earth. And I wanted to put this in here for context, because if you take a look at the profile view, it's unmistakably African. The prognathism, or the protruding lower jaw, is fundamentally African. So even with the nose missing and the beard missing, and Napoleon did not blow them off, it was probably chiseled off hundreds of years before Napoleon. But the point of showing this is that this is the single greatest statue on earth, and clearly Africoid. And in fact, if we take a look even closer on the other side, you'll notice right in front of the ear that there's some of the original paint. This is some of the original Africoid paint here that goes missing in most cases. The greatest statue on earth. So when Zahi Hawass, the Indiana Jones guy, and others are saying Africans had nothing to do with Kemet or ancient Egypt, they're looking at the greatest statue on earth, making outrageous claims. What about the Africoid paint? It's clearly there, to say the least. Now,
just want to give a quick sorry to cut in
yes.
Donation from Harlem Hottie. She said came in late, but shout out to my analytic kings. I'm making an assumption that's a woman there. I could be wrong. It's 2024, so you know.
Okay.
Sorry, hand back to you.
No, it's excellent. No problem.
Thank you, Harlem.
Okay, so this image here is Zoser. He's the one that commissioned the building of the first superstructure in world history, the builder of the first, what's now called step pyramid. But what's important is this. Here, this is, if you can see my cursor on his right jaw area, his cheek, this is part of the Africoid brown paint representing the skin color. Not only that, but Zoser in the third dynasty around 2800 before the Common Era, or 4,800 years ago, he's running the nation in locks. Yes, these are dreadlocks. So tell Rastaman that we appreciate the culture, but you didn't originate the locks. We see it right here with Zoser and other powerful African rulers ruling the nation in a cultural style that is absolutely powerful. This goes unnoticed by the foreigners who carefully overlook the reality of his locks. So this is not only that we can look at locks. Look at Amenemhet III in the literary age of the 12th dynasty, and he again is running the nation in locks. Some people thought he was a foreigner. How can he be a foreigner when he's one of the most important men in the history of the nation? So we can look at hair. We can look at hair. We can look at locks. We can look at Sister Henu. What is she doing? Braiding hair as a cultural hairstyle. And this is the Medu Neter or glyphs for braided hair. So when the conspirators are looking to misrepresent the history, the evidence is right there. That's why I say, my brother, that documentation beats conversation every day of the week. We just need to look at the artifacts, and they are obvious. This is why the racists and bigots and anti-African folks are so pathological, because you have the greatest contributions, and it's done by Africans. So
can I just throw in a pause really quickly there? So I just want to, could you bring back the last slide? Because this one's really important. Those of you who know on my channel at the moment, I'm doing a lot of study into Medu Neter, and what he just really glossed over there is that in ancient Kemet, in the Medu Neter, they have a determinative which defines hair. They also use it to define color. And it's these kind of three strands that are in this exact shape. So what he's just kind of blown, just a massive revelation and blown my mind, is that as actually a depiction of three locks. I never saw that before. I thought maybe it was like paint or something, but this makes it clear that's three locks. So the very determinative that they use to say we're speaking about hair or we're speaking about color is a depiction of three dreadlocks. Amazing. Sorry, you just blew my mind.
Okay. I'm glad you're weighing in to comment. No, great. So yeah, so you're right. So this is the Medu Neter for locks, and she's braiding hair, which is an African cultural hairstyle. And not only that, but we can continue looking at hair. Even the dolls they played with. Take a look at the doll. The doll is they use black fabric, jet black fabric, to represent the skin tone. The doll has a dress, but look at the beads used for what? For locks.
Wow.
Locks. We can look at just hair and things like that to determine identity. While
that looks exactly like the very few examples of ancient Egyptian wigs. They're always in this exact style with this exact texture. So it's amazing, the consistency.
Yes, sir. That's right. This is not some fantasy idea that they got a doll from foreigners. No. The dolls represented their own direct look. And we certainly can talk about combs or picks. This is a 5,000-year-old African or Afro pick right here. And you notice that it's in the African style. Not only is this is for African hairstyle, but in the ancient times, the artifacts such as combs and beds and things like that, there's always a connection to nature. You see animals, you see plants. In the modern times, so most people right now, they're looking and probably sitting in a chair with just regular legs or regular wheels. Not in antiquity. There always has to be the hooves of a cow or lion or a depiction of an animal because they were close to nature. But this is an Afro pick 5, and those of us who know about that, sometimes those teeth are broken when you're using a pick.
I'm just going to jump in really quickly there. We've had a 1999 donation from Akhenaten9. So thank you very much. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. And another one from Sujar Baker, another 1999 donation. Neither of them left comments. I wish they did. But thank you, both of you. Really appreciate it. Sorry to cut into you. And it's just blowing my mind. So just going back to that earlier point, because I'm just thinking about the Medu Neter is such a good, it's like they left clues for who they were within it. Most of us on the channel will be familiar with the face glyph, which is clearly an African face. Has a very broad nose, very thick lips. It's just very much kind of like very African face. But now in kind of concert with that, we also have the hair glyph, which depicts an African hairstyle. So it's almost like even in the Medu Neter, it's being codified who they were as a people, which is just, it's blowing my mind, actually. That's a really big revelation for me.
Yes, sir. And then check it out. This is Hesi Ray. He's the first known dentist in the history of the world. Not one of, but the world's first known dentist, going back to 2800 before the Common Era, or 4,800 years ago. And check this out. Not only was he the first known dentist, but he's a chief dentist, meant that he's over the profession of dentistry. So they had a whole operation dealing with specialty areas, whether it was dentistry and all kind of medical fields, which we know from the medical documents. But what's also here important, look at the helical structure of the hair. This is a beautiful afro, and we have to agree that Hesi Ray just came from the barber. This is a fresh cut with his beautiful afro. And guess what? This was on the side in the Cairo Museum. You had to actually look diligently to find Hesi Ray. Now they've taken him out. He's not in there anymore. So they're going to put Hesi Ray in these images in the new Grand Egyptian Museum whenever that opens. But how in the world could this ever be missed? It's missed because museums, the layout of the Cairo Museum and other museums around the world, which was part of my systematic study, is to mislead the public and have a phony organized tour that bypasses some of the most important images. This is not just a beautiful and powerful image. He's one of the most important people in the history of medicine and dentistry. So anyway, so that's Hesi Ray.
And it's such a, can I just jump in there? Because it's such a playbook. When I do my museum walkthroughs, I've done, I think, 3 on this channel now, maybe 3 or 4, and it's always the same playbook. When you, upon entry, you always have either extremely late period or Ptolemaic dynasty, or sometimes it will just be classical art that's depicting Egyptians. That's what you'll see. And then it's only once you're, 10, 15 minutes into the museum, you actually start get the dynastic era. So they'll get all of the intermediate period, you'll get that, you'll get all of the late period, all of the anything that's not Egyptian that they can pass off, as being Egyptian, that's clearly looking like it was Asiatic rule or some kind of foreign rule. That's what will get forefronted. And then you only get to the real stuff when you're quite deep in, and they've already done a good job at kind of instilling that lie within your mind that it was some kind of Arab civilization. But yeah, sorry, that's
and you see, like, the beautiful afro is pretty obvious. And you're right. When I started my writing series, The Vanishing Evidence of Classical African Civilizations, back in '94, I wrote about the museum layout as a way to misrepresent history. So in other words, the collection in Austria, Vienna, Austria, they have it in reverse chronology. So they have the more recent periods in the beginning of the gallery, and you got to go all the way to the end to see the original founders. That's by design. You don't change the chronology unless you're looking to misrepresent the history. And that's why I showed the map earlier, because if people can't get a map straight, then they can't get history straight. So this is Hesi Ray. And check this out. People go to the Cairo Museum and they miss the Afro wigs worn by priests. Yes, worn by priests. Actual wigs, human hair. That's what they are. So we can look at, again, combs and hairstyles and make this determination. But that's what is at stake. You have great contributions in math, medicine, architecture, writing, and all of the different sciences. In fact, all of the STEM areas, and the Africoid identity is obvious. And this is why people have engaged in a pathological and continue to engage in a pathological attack on the images. So,
and can I just add to that point, since you mentioned sciences, Macy Graham has just donated $10, and she said all major sciences originated in Africa. So that's just in agreement to what you just said there. Thank you, Macy, so much for the donation. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no problem. Well, that's why we use original African names. So from Kemet, we get chemistry. And so we have people teaching chemistry don't even know the root of the etymology or the root of their own discipline. So here we have Amenhotep III and Queen T. These are not only powerful Africoid images, but Amenhotep III in the 18th dynasty is one of the most prolific builders in the history of Kemet. there's very few that built on the scale of the powerful Amenhotep III, more than 30, 500 years ago or so, and his beautiful wife. So, and they have the distinctive Africoid appearance. Now, the Louvre has changed from when they used to have back in 1990 when I first went, or 89 rather. The Louvre used to have an entire room of just these reliefs of Amenhotep III. Now, they still have some, but not like they did before. And I remember when I first went, there was a lady who came out of there before I walked in crying. She was overwhelmed by all these images. But this is clearly Amenhotep III, but it's from a very powerful era that I describe as the Temple Age. Notice the beautiful almond-shaped eyes, the beautiful skin color of him and his wife. This is very, very important because I want to shift now and not only look at the colossal building projects of these kind of great builders who are building for eternity, but there are others who begin to attack these images. And so here's Amenhotep III again and his wife, Queen T. These are massive 60-foot statues in the Cairo Museum. Wow. I'm looking up and zooming in. And this is a huge gallery room, 60-foot high statues of husband and wife during one of the most prolific Renaissance periods of Africans regaining and reclaiming the throne. So now, this is mother, father, and son. Now, people will say that Akhenaten is the father of King Tut. I don't think so. And besides, the DNA tests that were done by the Cairo Museum have never been released. Zahi Hawass, or the Indiana Jones guy, he demanded that the DNA tests not be released because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. If those DNA results had been released, and all of these misidentifications would have become more pronounced. So whether Amenhotep III and Queen T are mother and father, as I would argue, or even if they're grandparents, it's still a powerful Africoid family in the 18th dynasty. Now, I'm showing this because here's where the fraud comes in, and this is where we will pivot and start looking at the outrageous conduct of folks who are bent on misrepresentation.
So can I just pause you really quickly there? Because could you bring back the last slide? Because people will pull you up on that. So it's really important that I think you've made yourself quite clear. But the first thing that people are going to say is Zahi Hawass and Co., the Egyptian Antiquities 2010, did a DNA test, and they stated quite unequivocally that Queen T was King Tut's grandmother, and I think Akhenaten was the father. No, we didn't have Akhenaten, did we? Because we have KV55, so we didn't have Akhenaten. We just have that. But they said, and then you got that whole thing about him keeping a lock of hair. I've always found that story very weird. But anyway, keeping a lock of hair, Queen T's hair in one of his canopic jars or something like that. That's what people are going to come back instantly and say. So what's your position on that?
So yeah, thanks for that. Okay, first of all, Zahi Hawass's position has no credibility. Documentation beats conversation. The African ancestors, so-called mummies, which is a disrespectful approach to looking at them, they are misidentified, or they were not identified or misidentified in the Cairo Museum. People should take a look at the books by Kent Weeks and his co-partner when they published the book X-Raying the Pharaohs. And this was X-rays from the 1960s. And what they concluded, Weeks and his colleague, is that the identifications are wrong because there's no way that the ages of the actual mummies, so-called mummies, when they were tested, they match what the assumptions were. So Weeks and his colleague made it very clear in X-Raying the Pharaohs that a lot of the identifications were wrong, and others now they had question marks about because the ages did not match up. So you can't have a father and son if they're basically the same age, for example. And so that's X-Raying the Pharaohs. So this 2010 DNA work of the Cairo Museum, they did DNA tests of all of the known, or all of the possession of the mummies they had, and never published the DNA results. Why did they not publish the results? You have to publish the entire sequence. They've said that Akhenaten was the father of King Tutankhamun. They also, with no evidence, they also said that he died because he received a blow to the head when somebody was looking to fight him for the throne. I said that made no sense because you don't have that in the cultural value system for somebody to beat somebody, to kill someone just to rule. That's a Roman thing. That's a Greek thing. So they found out that the hole in the skull of King Tutankhamun had nothing to do with him being hit in the head in antiquity. It had to do with what Howard Carter did, the British, the so-called British archaeologist who roughed up King Tutankhamun and severed his body into 17 different pieces in the 1920s. So they took off his head so they can get the golden mask. They took off his hands so they can get the jewelry. He was King Tutankhamun was the king of bling bling. They severed his elbow so they can take the jewelry. They sawed his body in half in order to take the jewelry from around his waist.
Goodness.
So he was cut into 17 different pieces. And then when Howard Carter had the official photograph of King Tutankhamun presented by the photographer Harry Burton, they put some soft white cotton around the neck so it looked like he was resting peacefully, but they had wrapped him up and severed him into 17 different pieces. So he's been roughed up badly. And the thing is that they were wrong about him being killed. They said, well, if it wasn't a blow to the head, maybe it was maybe he fell off a chariot, and maybe it could have been that Mars blew up, that Jupiter exploded. It's just guesswork without evidence. And so they did not publish the DNA results in 2010 because it would have revealed that the determinations that were being made were not consistent with the physical evidence. As Kent Weeks, as his colleague was Harris. So Harris and Weeks had concluded that the identifications were wrong, and that's why the DNA results were not published. So the thing is that if Queen T was the grandmother and Amenhotep III was the grandfather, as opposed to the mother and father, which I argue is not really a big issue, but they have not proven their case in the first place anyway. Why not produce the DNA results? Why did you do the DNA tests? Did not make them available. The whole sequence.
Yeah. I know. Sorry. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm gonna kind of stick on the subject a little bit because there's a few things that I'd like you to touch on. First of all, thank you, Roman, for the $4.99 donation. I know you've been sitting there for a little while. I'm just gonna quickly remove that, and has another one come through as well. No, I think that's it. Wait. Let me not miss one. Where's that? Oh, on Black Rampage. Thank you very much for on $9.99. He says supporting the two scholars. I'm trying to find your comment. There it is. Thank you very much. It's been going crazy in the comments feed. I'm trying to keep up. Going back once again to this, the kind of testing, because during that 2010 study that was done on all of those kind of Amarna / 18th dynasty, I think a few 19th dynasty mummies were tested in there as well. One of the conclusions they came up with as well is regarding the incest, which I would like you to touch on as well. I don't know how much, but I'd like to touch on that because they just basically came to the conclusion that King Tut and his wife were first brother and sister. The kids were inbred. He was the result of parents who were siblings. I don't know how much of this has got support in the Kemetic texts. At least it will be interesting to get your feedback and your thoughts once again regarding this, because just to kind of add to this, I know that firsthand that Zahi Hawass lies. I did a live stream a few months ago about the fact that he's openly and clearly lied about the cephalic index of King Tut's head. King Tut has a dolichocephalic head. He's one of the most famous long-headed people in history. He's known for having a very long, narrow head. And the results of his testing, in that same report, he says that he's brachycephalic. So he's basically saying he's got a square head, which is exact opposite of what's visible. And I literally took every single available scan of King Tut that was available on the net, measured his cephalic index, and every single time he measured between 72 and 74, making him strongly dolichocephalic. So the fact that he'll just publish that he's brachycephalic when everyone has eyes and can see means that there's very little integrity on the part of Zahi Hawass in terms of what's published. So I rambled a little bit. I just want to hand it back over to you. What are your thoughts regarding some of the outcomes of the test regarding, you know, the inbreeding and the disease and this, that, and the other?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, that's the whole thing, that they never published the entire sequence. And so here's what we know about the Nile Valley, from Kemet in the north, going all the way up, not down, but up south into Nubia and into Sudan, the region of ancient Kush. Here's what we know, is that the women were the ones who controlled the throne. So the throne was under the control of the women. And so, and then the mother would pass on the throne to the daughter politically. So the brother then has to politically marry his sister. It's a political marriage, because the man does not have authority, or the son, he doesn't have authority or legitimacy. He cannot be properly installed unless he has to politically marry his sister, which is very, it's a necessary step. And then why does he have a second wife, for example, to procreate and have children? The first wife is a political marriage. And when they say that someone's brother, father, or sister or wife, they don't mean it the way the Europeans think they mean it, because these are foreigners trying to interpret complex African social and family relationships. So you see it with even with the first trinity in the world: Asar, Aset, and Heru, or so-called Osiris, so-called Isis, and so-called Horus. I say so-called because those are Greek and foreign names. It's better to use the original names. So, for example, the name Asar is, so he's the one that's ruling Kemet, and his sister / wife is Aset. So we actually see, even in the Trinity, they are associating those two, because it's not necessarily the conjugal as people who don't know the culture thinks. But what is very important, if we look at the name Aset, not the Greek name that came thousands of years later, Isis, but Aset, the name Aset, and the symbol is a throne, literally a throne on her head. So the name Aset literally means throne or to rule. So the women have always had a very central role in protecting and maintaining and presenting the throne. So yes, the men are the symbol of authority when you see them on a throne, but the women are the source of the authority. So it's from mother to daughter, and that's why when somebody is installed, you have the god and goddess crowning the person as a ruler, but the person who's always presiding over the ceremony, guess what? It's always mom. There's always the mother who presides over the ceremony, and the father's not even present. He's not even shown. He's not even named. But you see the woman there who is presiding over the entire ceremony, where people are given their crown. They're being coronated. So these are political marriages and not conjugal marriages. So it's more sophisticated, and the DNA tests were not produced, so they were not able to prove anything. And they would have proved the opposite, and that's why there was a need to withhold the DNA sequencing. And but what's really important to also know is that these mummies, so-called mummies, these African ancestors, were not all labeled in the Cairo Museum. And they created a special mummy room, and they still were not labeled because we didn't know. But here's the deception. In 2021, when they had the golden, the parade of the golden parade of the pharaohs, they took these almost 24 royal images from the Cairo Museum and had a parade through the streets, which is totally disrespectful, and put them in a new national museum of Egyptian civilization. This new national museum has a special room now with these African rulers, or so-called mummies, and now they all are labeled. How could they be labeled now? They were not labeled in the Cairo Museum. Now you put them in the new museum, and they're labeled when you've done no work or research or no DNA that's been released, and suddenly they have a name. So the people who don't know the background, that it was questioned by Harris and Weeks and X-Ray and Pharaohs, it was contradictory when they did the DNA test in 2010, and all of a sudden now they put some labels in the new collection. And here's the other thing. A lot of the identifications are off. They're off in terms of their age. They're off in terms of the relationship. They're off in terms of many different things. They're off in terms of their height. They're much taller than what these people had been assuming. So people should be very careful if they, and Hawass said that, to show you how ridiculous he is, he made up a new tomb that didn't even exist. The last identifiable tomb in the Valley of the Kings was found in 1922. It was King Tutankhamun's tomb, Kings Valley Tomb 62, or they just abbreviated KV for Kings Valley 62. That's the last one found. And guess what? The University of Memphis and Otto Sladen, they were excavating in the Valley of the Kings a few years ago, and they found a chamber. The chamber had no writing in it. The chamber had no coffin or anything like that. So as careful archaeologists, they said that we need to continue to excavate. We're not sure what this chamber is. Hawass stepped in, took over their excavation, and made a wild, irresponsible claim, talking about this was KV 63. Ain't no 63. He said it was a number 63, and it was. He's prone for this, always mentioning popular names. Just maybe the wife and the mother of King Tutankhamun. Well, what? And so he's making this up, and the Memphis scholars said nothing. They didn't agree with that, and it turns out that it was not a tomb. It was a storage chamber for those who were building tombs and who were mummifying their ancestors. So it was just a storage chamber and no evidence of a burial at all, and certainly no evidence of any royal burial. So it cannot be called a tomb, but people can go online and they can see AB 63 because Hawass stepped in to misrepresent what was discovered. Why would he do that? Because he knows that if somebody finds a new tomb in the Valley of the Kings, it's going to translate into money. That's all it's about, money and fame for him. It has nothing to do with being accurate. So we cannot rely on him when he did not produce any evidence. Documentation beats conversation. So
can I just quickly jump in there quickly? I just want to say hello to Quelly Mika, who's online, another really good scholar. He's got a fantastic channel. He's just finally catching a live. Hi, Professor. Hi, King. Hi, everyone. And there's another donation. Mahaka Zulu has donated $9.99 and said, usurpers, colonizers, liars, and thieves always claiming someone else's mother and father. I feel your passion, man. I'm not gonna lie. I feel your passion when you're talking about King Tut and what Howard Carter, how he essentially just mutilated, that king who'd been resting untouched, for several thousands of years, 3,000 years, and he comes along, and the first thing that he thinks of is to totally mutilate him, to remove jewelry. It's disgusting. It's just really disgusting. I can't fathom that these people want to lay claim to some kind of connection or even ancestry, and in the same breath do something like that, which just seems I don't know. It just seems inhuman. Would you even treat it, if they found a mummified crocodile, would they treat it like that? But when they find the mummified African, the amount of disdain they show towards it kind of proves the distance that they feel between them and that person who's resting.
Absolutely, that's a good point. And someone had asked, I forgot who you were. You had asked a question about, were they eating mummies? Absolutely. That's what the term was called, eating mummy. And so you had the Arabs, the modern Arabs, literally running to dig up African ancestors from classical Kemet to sell them so that they can be ground up and eaten and used as powder for medicinal purposes, for arthritis and the rheumatism. So you had a whole industry that fueled Southern European medical fantasies in Italy, even in France, but in Southern Europe, it was a huge thing to eat mummies. So what happened to all of these African ancestors? They're in the bellies of Europeans.
Unbelievable.
Because eating mummy had went on up to the late 1800s, they were still systematically dining on African ancestors, supposedly because of some medical benefits. And then you had modern Arabs living in these areas, not only digging up African ancestors from antiquity, but digging up modern people if they couldn't find anybody from antiquity. But the whole goal was is to grind up mummy parts and digest them. And so, yes, that's what happened to a lot of the mummies. And this is not a secret. It's just not promoted very much. But there's been all kind of dastardly things done. But the one thing that someone should never do is believe Zahi Hawass. He is a master of misrepresentation and deception. And if anybody saw even before 2010 what he did with the remains of King Tutankhamun, were criminal. They did the CT scans in his tomb in KV 62, and you can see the photographs of the real physicians and the real scientists. They had on masks and gloves, not Hawass. He had his dirty, nasty hands without gloves, his dirty, nasty breath breathing on the remains of King Tutankhamun. Now, the thing is that some people say, well, look, I want to wear a mask to protect myself. No, King Tutankhamun needed to be protected from Hawass because of his dirtiness. But who would do that? Somebody that has no respect. So why the results were not published. Why would anybody do DNA tests if it wasn't to publish them? So geneticists and researchers can look at the sequence because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So Hawass,
they published a small part of them, didn't they? I think they did the STR. They published some of their STR results, and African researchers, I think it was Jourdain and Keita, run the results, and I think another company called DNA Trabs did it as well. They run the results through a STR matching algorithm, and it matched them closest to continental or black Africans by some degree. They came out very, very consistently amongst Africans amongst the Great Lakes regions. So I'd imagine Hawass, knowing that those studies existed, was petrified of releasing the full sequence DNA, because I think it would have been a nail in the coffin to this illusion that there's some debate to be had about the ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, that's it. And and then the other, so every so many years they go in to disrespect King Tutankhamun. So in 2005 they went in with the CT scans, and then they gave the digital images to forensic, not scientists, but forensic artists, and they who were from the America forensic artistic team from France, and the forensic artist team from Egypt, and they all came up with wild speculative results that have nothing to do with facts. So these are all original images of Tutankhamun. This is his head from a lotus flower. This is a mannequin where they tried on the actual clothes. This is as lifelike and realistic as it could ever get. And this
I
is
just want to remove the I've got something in front of your picture, so I might as well read this out now. Don Juan knows best said, please keep exposing Zahi Hawass and his lies, and he's donated $9.99. And we have a $2 donation again from Macy Gray. It says, telltale signs they're the original people. Must be related to something we said earlier. But thank you both of you for donations. Sorry, carry on, Professor.
Okay. Yeah, so what happened in 2005, they chose this image. This is the French image. This is on a National Geographic front cover. And the only thing I agree with regarding this, so King Tutankhamun lost all of his melanin, and he lost his African identity when they came up with this outrageous image. The only thing accurate about this cover is the title, The New Face of King Tut. And here's where the misrepresentation begins at a whole nother level. So they did that in 2005, and then in 2010, they went in to disrespect him again. Also, folks should know, now, if you have not gone to Kemet, now in his tomb, what these criminals have done is taken him from his coffin, because he had a coffin within a coffin within a coffin. It was a whole series of protection to make sure that he could rest in peace. Not anymore. These people went in. Now they made a little glass case. When you walk into the tomb of the young African ruler who died around the age of 19, He's right there when you walk down the stairs. And if somebody does not tell you that, it's shocking and disturbing. And so that's what it is now, because they want to make money, want people to buy a special ticket to go in there. So this image here that you see on the National Geographic cover, the brothers and sisters in Los Angeles, they said that's the Boy George image, and they dismiss it out of hand as outrageous modern fantasy. Now, look, here's where the forgeries take place here. So this image here, and a couple of slides shifted when we came to StreamYard, but they still show they shifted slightly. This is a documented forgery that you're looking at, folks. This is the image, a fake image of Queen Tedashiri. So this was in the British Museum when this was bought in the 1880s. And it was on display for about 100 years, literally for an entire century. And the British Museum peddled this as authentic. Now, Tedashiri is a real historical queen, one of the most important in the 17th dynasty that led to the liberation, because that was the liberation dynasty to kick out the Hyksos and subdue those foreigners, and they created another golden age, which is the Temple age in the 18th dynasty. So Tedashiri is the ancestress of most of the illustrious rulers in the 18th dynasty. We were looking at Amenhotep III, Queen T. We mentioned Akhenaten. We'll look at Nefertiti and King Tutankhamun. You name it. She was the ancestor, very important ancestor. So Tedashiri is a real historical figure, but the statue here is fake and phony, made by the hands of modern man. Now,
so who was she the wife of? Was it Kamos or sorry?
No, Kamos. No, not Kamos. I have to think about it.
Is it Sobkem Shaf? I think.
Yeah, I'll think of it in one second here. So very important, Queen Tedashiri, powerful ruler, very important ruler. This is fake and phony. So the British Museum Egyptologists were suspecting there's something wrong with this. So they finally took it off a display in the 1980s to do chemical tests, because number one, the wig is completely unique. No other wigs like it at all. As you see this opening in the wig, completely unique. The white woman facial appearance, completely unique. Also unique is this ridiculous dress that shows her breasts or nipple, completely unique, nothing like it but it. And not only that, but the meduneture here is one grammatical error after another. In some cases, doesn't even say anything. It's just garbage. So they took it off display and did the test that this is modern garbage. So I saw this in a British Museum exhibit called Fake, the Art of Deception. So nobody can say that the conspirators won't forge something of this magnitude. Of course they would, and they did. This is indefensible now, but for 100 years, this was being peddled to the world as a white woman on the throne in Kemet, and this has nothing to do with facts.
It's comically bad. Sorry, I'm just looking at it and it just makes me laugh. It's such a poor attempt at making an ancient Egyptian artwork. Sorry, carry on.
Absolutely. This is absurd. It's insane. So this is the precedent of the extent to which the pathological people will go to de-Africanize images. And Egyptologists they're quiet, and so our museum collections are quiet about a lot of different images like this, because if they start examining their images and their artifacts, they probably wouldn't have much in there. So they're quiet about it. In many cases, there's no clear record of where they were actually found. You can't just say, well, somewhere in the region of Waset or Thebes. Well, what do you mean? This is a large area. Where? So there's usually no particular records. It's just someone sold it to somebody else, made money, and then the museum acquired it. But this, folks, is a fake. It's a phony. And the exhibit Fake, the Art of Deception, documented this phony image. And you can buy that online, that catalog. I saw it in person, by the way. So I was glad to see that, because that's what I was in Europe doing, partly is to document forgeries. Now, so that's what has already been clearly documented. Now, moving forward, the Cairo Museum, you talk about forgeries, these are some of the greatest. This, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, in here is a outrageous organization of artifacts to try to support images that are made by the hands of modern man and are not artifacts from antiquity. They're modern. So room 32, this is the forgery room. This is where one of the great forgeries exists today, Rahotep and Nofret. They're put in the middle of the museum floor for a reason, to draw attention. And I was shocked when I saw this in 1990 because of the fact that it looked nothing like any other images other than their own images. And Rahotep and Nofret are real historical figures, but these are fake and phony. In fact, when I published my book, which will be entitled Modern Fraud, I will reveal the entire details that these fake and phony statues were created in 1871. That's when they were created. So they're supposed to be made during the Pyramid Age, and people assumed that these were legitimate statues until I came along and said, not so fast. These are forgeries. So look, let's go through this really briefly, the rules that these violate. You can go from head to toe, and there's over a dozen rules that the artist and the artistic canon requires. So even a layperson, if they've seen one image from Kemet, they can usually make out other images because the artists were following a rule system that they believe was given to them by the god Ptah. And if the god gave a rule system, a artistic canon, then by definition is perfect. That's why you don't see a lot of variation. Yes, you can see subtleties from, one era to the next, the color schemes or very small variations, but the themes remain the same. One thing you do not see, for example, the problem when the conspirators created these fake and phony images, number one, let's go to the big issue, that there's no excavation reports and no photographs. Those are the things that are required. If you say that you found something, a requirement is that you take photographs in the situation in which you claim to have found it. They're called in situ, IN-SITU, no in situ photographs. Also, no excavation reports, because these were not excavated. They were created in 1871. I got a whole a body of ammunition to show this. So the modern conspirators, they didn't understand the rule system. So, for example, they didn't understand that you don't have a male and female sitting by each other not showing affection. This is a rule that's not violated, but they didn't know that because they're thinking differently. That's one issue. Also, when you have individual seated statues, the medu netre, the writing is down by the feet and legs, never by the head. For individual
they even got that right on Tetishiri's.
yeah, exactly. At least on the Tetishiri, at least they had it. Yeah. They had more than a decade or so to learn a little bit more about the art. And there's so many other things that are problematic. Now, we can continue down the list. She has a diadem that no other queen has for Nofret. This is totally unique. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the light skin colors. You don't find light skin colors like that for women and men during the Pyramid Age. Are you kidding me? And by the way, Rahotep was not given a wig. Usually a royal family member or high official, usually they will have a wig or something like that, but not this here. And besides, I don't know why they gave this white guy an afro anyway. They're tripping here in terms of genetics. Let me zoom in a little closer so folks can see here some of the other craziness. Rahotep is the only statue in the world with a gray mustache. Rahotep also is the only one with a kind of a cord to represent a necklace. He's got a white cord, and it's a smudge of gray here. It should be gray and white all the way around. In fact, folks, if you can see closely, if you look at the uneven cheek paint all over his body. Now, this was an age where they were at their best. The artisans, the craftsmen, the painters, they were at their best. They were able to carve and paint with great perfection, but not here. The cheek paint did not dry evenly. Not only that, you see the grayish eyes. There's only 11 in the world, and they all have been doctored up in the Cairo Museum and the Louvre. So room 32 they have other images in that room and the previous room, room 42, in order to support these forgeries. These are completely invented, completely made up. If you look carefully, might be hard to see, but the nose, there's holes to represent the nostrils. You never see that. But here you do, because the conspirators did not know the rules. You might ask folks, well, how do you know, Professor Manu? Because I've studied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of images, over 1 million, to carefully study with the eyes of an optometrist what the rule system was. We're talking about specific rules during a specific period of royal family members. And so look,
just to go back over that point, what did you mean about the holes regarding the nostrils? Just clarify that a bit for me, please.
Yeah, the nostrils usually have like a niche, as we was pointing out with Rameses. It's a niche and not a complete hole to represent nostrils. They don't have that. It's usually a niche, not a complete hole as we see here. And what I'm sharing is complete anomalies. Rahotep was the son of the pyramid builder Seneferu. He was a high priest and he was a general in the army. So he had at his disposal the best, the state-trained artist who followed a strict high-level rule system for the artistic canon. They don't go out and just experiment and start doing things on their own. This is why you don't find these rules being violated with statues of royal family members and high officials. But with Rahotep, I'm pointing out a bunch of unique features here. But people can take a look at the nose. You don't see the complete hole representing the nostril, or gray mustache, or the eye color. All of this is, and skin color, this is ridiculous. And Medu Neter, nope, not by the head. In fact, it is very rare, extremely rare. Let me go back. It is rare. It's like 1 out of 10,000 that you would even see a high back chair. You almost never, ever see this. It'll be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of 1% of images that would ever have a backboard for an individual seated statue, not joint, because joint they would have it for just stability. And I'm not talking about standing statues. I'm talking about seated statues in the rule system. And let's see, other rules here. Let me see if I can zoom in. Actually, with Nofret, she's wearing a cloak that women did not wear. This is worn during certain ceremonies for pharaohs, not for women. She's the only one with a cloak like this. She's the only one with a diadem like this. Notice that she's slanted off to the left. So there's no balance, there's no harmony there, which is absurd. I don't know how well you all can see, folks, but the other thing would be that her nipples are really showing. And here's the rule system. Nipples are never shown, or if they are, they're flat and unnoticeable. So I have closer up images. This one you may or may not can see, but the bottom line is that your attention is drawn here because the forgers were apparently freaky. And the freaky forgers, they made her upper body in a way that a freak would, but you don't see that in the art. I'm talking about, you can go through hundreds of images, you won't see it during the time period of the Pyramid Age. And now here's the other thing that's interesting, is that the rules that I just mentioned, and actually let me point one other one out, is that Rahotep does not have anything in his hand. I have a closer up image. There's nothing in his clenched fist. There's nothing that could have been in there because there's no hole for this hand or the other hand. When you're there in person, you notice a closed fist. They don't make empty gestures as you see here. Plus his left arm is sliding off of his leg. This is no balance. There's no harmony here. Where in the hell would you see that other than when somebody's creating a forgery? But look at an original in the British Museum in London. This is an original relief, because the forgers destroyed any original statues they had and then peddled the Rahotep and Nofret forgeries to the world. But this relief is in existence. This is a painted relief of Rahotep. Now, if you notice, he has, as he would always have an item of authority in his hand. You cannot have a clenched fist without something in it. You see here, it's not the afro that you just saw, folks. Also notice the original reddish brown or brownish paint that the conspirators actually scrubbed off. This didn't just fade away, it's scrubbed
Mm.
off because the average person is not going to look that carefully. They're going to just look and say, okay, and they move on. I'm showing a close up. Also, notice the low back chair, which is always the rule. All the other rules are followed here on the relief, but why not in the statue? Because it is a modern forgery. And then moving on, take a look. The cheap paint didn't even dry evenly. It's you got look, you got completely different colors, which are pretty obvious to see because the conspirators didn't know what they were doing and they were involved with some outrageous cheap paint work. And that's why we get this craziness that paint is dripping down the back of his neck. Really, during the pyramid age when they were building for eternity, no other example like this anywhere in the world other than Rahotep. This is a forgery created in 1871 for racial reasons. That's why there's no excavation report. That's why there are no photographs at all. And so this is one of the great ones. So who says it's a forgery? I do. It's my work to show room 32 is a outrageous forgery and is based on peddling some non-African images. And most scholars, but not most, scholars just assume that these were quote unquote light-skinned Libyans. No, not at all. This has nothing to do with anybody other than forgers creating this craziness. So that's Rahotep and Nofret. And
someone called it the Escal drip.
yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Exactly. And it's dripping because they were rushing this to market. And by the way, the artists who couldn't stop paint from dripping, the same artists who allegedly couldn't even get the paint to dry evenly, the same artists somehow can paint masterpieces. These are the geese from Meidum. These are universally agreed to as masterpieces, the 6 geese. Look at the details. You see the difference between the high-level African painters and artisans when they are doing their work versus the modern conspirators is night and day. There's no way that these are the same people who create a masterpiece versus that sloppy stuff, that crude, clumsy, and sloppy nonsense that we just saw. So the Meidum geese exposes the 1871 forgers. So that's why my book would be called Modern Fraud. And these are 2 of the greatest forgeries in the history of ancient African archaeology. This is absurd. This is completely absurd to peddle this to the world and people act as though paint's not dripping.
Do you think there's been any progress in regards to Egyptology actually? Because one would think that in the information age that we find ourselves in now, that there will be more pressure to actually begin to, phase out, the front facing of Rahotep and Nofret, being that they're so obviously faked and they break so many rules. Do you see, from your kind of head to your ear to the street in terms of Egyptology, do you see that there's any leaning towards or any mumblings behind kind of the authenticity of these statues and actually maybe a temptation to remove these from the Cairo Museum?
No, because it's such a central piece, just like the unknown scribe in the Louvre. They got arrows and signs. Go see the scribe because they want to point out those light-colored eyes. So no, this is central to the collection. So they will never consider it. And the pressure will be when I publish my book and put forth the complete set of evidence to show that these are made by the hands of modern man. They're modern distasteful forgeries. But other than that, is to lie and deny and ignore. At this point, is to ignore. And until there's a groundswell of opposition, then the officials act as though they don't see what I'm showing. So it really depends on me just breaking away with my time and publishing the definitive evidence and the whole sequence, because there's a lot of other things that I could point out. But no, they'll never do that. There's Oscar Muscarella. He worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. He wrote a book called The Lie Became Great. And he discusses the forgery culture. So in forgery culture, it's it's just like my father would say, some things you don't talk about. And they don't talk about forgery, and they don't talk about the shaky record of how they acquired certain items. Because if people look at the placards really carefully, a lot of times it'll say provenance unknown, meaning that they don't know where it came from. which is very suspicious because you don't know where it came from. Yeah, it probably came from somebody creating it in modern times, but just to buy it from somebody so they can build a collection, that's all these large, museums and houses have done, so that they can then charge people an interest fee and create a whole industry around pimping and peddling African artifacts, as opposed to questioning if they're legitimate or not. So,
what's the name of that author or who wrote The Lie Became Great? Oscar
Oscar Muscarella.
Muscarella.
Oscar
Okay.
Muscarella. Yes,
Okay, well, I might have to buy that to tide me over until you finish your book, which I've been waiting for patiently for about a decade.
I know. Well, look, it's coming, and you know what? And the reason why I'm presenting this is to challenge myself to take away the time and
Yes.
and publish. Because hey man, when are you gonna publish? Say, we got so much work to do. I'm not doing any more research. It's not that I have to know anything more. It's just a matter of getting it done. I'm presenting this to really challenge myself to get it out there, because I challenge any Egyptologist in the world to say it ain't so we can expose all of the lies and nonsense where they're peddling these and other images. This is absurd, and that's just the beginning of it. I mean, if we look further, the Nefertiti image, I've also been collecting this. These are original images of Nefertiti, original.
Can I just pause you really quickly? I just want to give a quick shout out to Quadro, who made a donation some time ago. So keep up the good work, Professor and King. We appreciate it. Looking forward to adding the Professor's new book to my library when it's released. And I think many people are going to reflect that same sentiment. So yeah, we're all waiting for you to release that. And it's a $20 donation. So thank you, Quadro. I really, really appreciate it. Yes, he's one of my Patreon supporters as well. So yeah, much appreciated.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So if we look at these images, if we look at the top and bottom on the left, look at the Africoid facial structure of Nefertiti. That's pretty obvious. The Africoid facial structure is there. And then in the middle, notice that she's showing affection to one of her 6 daughters. Notice the juicy African kissing lips in both of these middle images. And then on the right, notice the Africoid color, representing the paint, representing their skin tone. These are, and there's many more, but these are original images of Nefertiti. And by the way, Nefertiti didn't do very much. The only reason why people know about, because there's a whole line of queens that were very significant. They were builders, they were female rulers, but people know more about Nefertiti simply because somebody tried to make her white, and then they want to translate the name. The beautiful one has come, because Nefer means beauty, and then Titi means to come. But these are all authentic. So somehow, from these images in the 18th dynasty, 3,400 years ago, we get these Africoid images of the original Nefertiti in different museums: Cairo Museum, the Cleveland Art Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, many images of her. But how do you go from that to this nonsense here? This is a modern 20th century forgery. This is the so-called Berlin bust, created in 1912. And Burckhardt and his colleagues, these Germans, they go in and they fabricate and create from scratch this fake and phony image, which looks like nothing. It looks nothing
like none of our other portraits. None of them look like this. At the moment, I'm actually doing a rather extensive study, which has about 1 or 2 more legs to go on Nefertiti's bust. And I think I've mentioned it to you. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that Nefertiti has numerous busts. Well, I say busts, quite a few busts, but also numerous steles, and they're all incredibly consistent. They do look like the same person, and that person doesn't. This is the only one that looks like this. So
it's the only one that looks like this.
It's the only one that looks like this. So common sense would say, well, she's got numerous busts. We could ignore the one that's an outlier, which I think you mentioned didn't even come with any kind of inscription or cartouche. So very well, even if it was real, we could easily postulate that it's not her and that's somebody else, because we don't even have anything to identify it. But I don't think it's real. I've seen it and it looks like it's made of plastic. But anyway, I'll I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This has been stated. You know, people have been saying that this is a fake, but it's pretty clear to me from my extensive work that it's a fake. First of all, a white woman. This is a German woman, modern German woman masquerading as someone from classical Kemet. And this doesn't make any sense. Here you have a bust here that is created for what purpose? A model? Well, why isn't the left eye? So the left inlaid eye is not there. So the conspirator, oh, by the way, as usual, we don't have any reports from the time. So this was created in 1912. Nobody wrote about this until Burckhardt comes up with the phony explanation 11 years later. It's not until 1923 that we even hear anything about it. That's not how research or archaeological work works. There has to be detailed written reports, step by step, of how the alleged discovery was made, and in situ photographs. We don't get any in situ photographs either. What we do get is a fake and phony stage image here where this is phony. People, where's the dirt on it? So they claim that this is a photograph. This is phony. This is a fake staged image, to say the least. And look, they're looking down like this is. Why are they looking down? Because this is a staged photograph of a fake and phony modern forgery. And again, you got the Germans who go in. They're fabricating history. So 1912 was a very crucial year for them in creating this phony and fake bust. It wasn't found in 1912. It was created around 1912, but nobody saw it until almost a decade later. And there's no evidence of any of this being legitimate at all. But the bottom line is there's no evidence of a white woman in the middle of the African royal family during the 18th dynasty. And besides, where is the evidence? Documentation beats conversation. So this is absurd. This is phony. This is fake. But here's what the issue is: that the Germans were fighting with the British and others. They're looking for national identity to see who could find the treasures and to wrap their identity around it. So they placed great emphasis on this fake and phony image, talking about the beautiful one is coming up with this kind of this description. And so Nefertiti obviously is a real historical figure, but these are fake and phony and supposedly found in a workman's studio. How could this be a model for anything else about Nefertiti when it's the only one that looks quite like this, the only one with this skin color that reminds us of someone of European descent? Why wasn't the eye finished? Why is she looking like this? This is completely staged, and this is why this has been highly questioned, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the family portrait. It doesn't fit the portrait of any of the Nefertiti images or her family at all. This is, you're right, it's a complete outlier. And this photograph that was taken later is phony, fake, and staged.
Actually, on this particular bust, I'm not sure where you sit on it. I happen to believe that they may have tampered an existing bust, because they said they've run some scans or something and they found genuine limestone that sits beneath. But that kind of brings me on to my point about the fact that the top layer of this bust is stucco and plaster, which I'm not sure, just off head, I can't think of like a great deal of busts that were developed using stucco and plaster. I'm not saying it wasn't used, but off head, I'm struggling to bring to mind. It's normally wood or limestone or some kind of workable, some kind of workable natural kind of material. Off head, which other stucco busts can you think? Because I can't think of any. I'm literally trying to bring to mind ones that are made of that compound. Is that normal, or is that another red flag? What's your thoughts around the material that was used? And a quick one. Sorry, Mahakazulis donated $5. Thank you. Says Professor Manu is an extraordinary forensic scientist and a national treasure. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there seems to be you're right that they took some existing material and added. There's some stucco images, but you
Mm,
don't really find that during this time period
mm,
of time period of Nefertiti in the 18th dynasty. So there are images, there's heads, but the thing is, none of them look like this, and they didn't really
mm,
have like the same composition. So yeah, it does seem like they took something from a studio and it took them some time to concoct this. They needed a woman to sit for a as a model, a
mm,
modern German woman as a model. But yeah, there are some things
mm,
that you can find, but at this time, no, it doesn't seem to add up at all. And this is
mm,
consistent with what I had shared about Tedashiri, but also Rahotep and Nofret. There's these totally unique features
mm,
that they're completely unique in many
mm,
regards, if not completely, and yet all of the other images they fit a well known, well defined
mm,
artistic canon and pattern. But this one doesn't, which is
mm,
amazing. In fact, the material, you're right to point that out, but even the shoulders don't even make any sense to go
mm,
vertical like that as opposed to more horizontal. They don't innovate like that because they believe that the creator, Ptah, is the one that gave them the rule system. But this is totally ridiculous that they would peddle this. But they are the Germans under Bocard and others. They are looking to advance their status and to
mm,
try to, you know, to elevate the German identity at the same time. Because you know, you got shortly after this, you got the Nazi Party that came
mm,
along and took some of that national sentiment to try to build and boost German historical credibility. But here we have this fake and phony forgery. This is Akhenaten,
mm,
the husband of Nefertiti. This one, I saw you did a piece. So this is in the Louvre. I mean,
mm,
married a 10, you know, one of the daughters. And by the way, it's important to note the original Africoid paint
mm,
here and also at the neck. We can comment on hairstyle, but look at the color scheme of Akhenaten,
mm,
another one of the six daughters, the color
mm,
scheme, and then Nefertiti. So as you look at the Africoid skin color, the brownish skin color of all three of them, the one that doesn't make any sense is the forgery on the right. How in the hell could this make any sense at
mm,
all? It doesn't make any sense. But the forgers are not concerned about that. The forgeries are done for racial reasons,
mm,
even as irrational as it is for them, and for commercial reasons to make money.
mm,
So it's important to really know that. That's why these people have engaged in a pathological assault on the
mm,
historical record to take away African contributions to humanity. And this is part of the forgery culture, is to peddle and promote this everywhere. In fact, all over Egypt, they're peddling and promoting this. You see it even before you get in the country. Even the visa, the travel visa, when you are getting off the plane,
mm,
Egypt Air, even the visa card you have to fill out, the watermark, the silhouette is this forgery. And you go to many of the shops, guess what? They have a
mm,
fake and phony so-called Nefertiti bust there in a shop,
mm,
no matter what they're selling. Even if they're not even selling fake bust, they have that there. And so that's what people are being bombarded with, that kind of nonsense. Now, on the flyer for this presentation here, a Hemiunu, my brother, you posted this one, so I wanted to end by
mm,
sharing another aspect of forgery, and we have to look at it in great detail next time, but I want to introduce it. This is a statue of Hemiunu that was found in 1912 by
mm,
Herman Junker, and his tomb was in the tomb of Hemiunu. He was a chief architect who was like overseer of great works. So he would be responsible for organizing and supervising the building of the great pyramids there during the time of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, the great pyramid builders. But this is how the Hemiunu statue was found. There was no head at all.
mm,
And but now it has a head, and I wanted to point this out because it's obvious the facial reconstruction work that's been done after
Mm.
discovery. And I mentioned Hermann Juncker, the German archaeologist who was responsible for finding this because he had an agenda. And Hermann Juncker, I remember Hermann Juncker in 1921, he wrote a outrageous article, and the title was "The First Appearance of Negroes in History." And Herman Juncker said that black people were nowhere even in the vicinity. Not only were they not in Egypt, they weren't even in the vicinity to be influenced. And so Herman Juncker writes this kind of nonsense. And so he's the one that engaged in this extensive uh, facial reconstruction here, the plastic surgery, as we can call it, that took place. And so when people see this today, they don't know this damn head ain't original at all. This was created. Let's go back so people can see. This is how it's found. There was no head around. So this anti-race, this anti-African racist Herman Juncker, who had the nerve to say the Africans were not around until the 18th dynasty. In other words, it took Africans thousands of years to the 18th dynastic family of rulers before they were even around to be influenced. So at the early pyramid age, the fourth dynasty.
So why has that German got a shape up? Can you just explain to me what is going on with this head that they found? Because it's
exactly
the proportions between the head and the body are that's why I laughed when if you can pull it up on the screen again, the full one. I laughed because the proportions, the head is tiny, it looks like Beetlejuice. And
exactly,
this looks nothing like anything you will find anywhere in ancient Kemet. What is going on? How have they? Exactly. Sorry, this is the worst. Go on.
Yeah, and this is peddled to the world. And you know what? This is among the small group of completely unique images that are not parallel anywhere else in the world. That's what's so amazing about it. You can look at, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of reliefs and statues, and it's the same artistic rules and patterns followed. But these are the ones that people see over and over again, and they're totally unique, including the Hemiunu statue. So yes, the head doesn't match the body. The head is completely concocted. In fact, what they did was, you can see that this would have had black hair, but the systematic stripping of paint is something that really has to be addressed and looked at in detail, because it is always the systematic paint stripping that takes place. People think that, well, this is an old statue or old relief. It goes back, 4,600 years. So the paint must have just faded away. Not at all. They use beeswax to make sure that they locked in the paint colors. So that is not what happened. These are people that some cases they take the wet squeeze technique to take the colors off of the images, and then they want to reproduce them in their collection. Other times it's just a systematic just sponging off of the color. So all we see now is the white limestone. And the way that the eye works, people see white limestone, they figure it must be a white person. No, not at all. In Kemet, they did not leave a white limestone surface to represent skin tone. Not at all. They always applied the color. They always applied color for skin tone. This is outrageous. It's absurd. Anybody can see all the facial work that's been done. And by the way, why did they have an aquiline or thin nose? Okay, I'm glad people asked that question. The reason why is because, check this out. This is crazy. There's one relief of Hemiunu, a relief from a side view profile, a relief, not a statue. So from the relief, they come up with how the nose would have looked in this 3D, this 3D image here, this statue. What, from a flat image of Hemiunu on a relief? How do you come up with a statue with this facial structure? This has nothing to do with science. This is science fiction. It's a racial agenda by Hermann Juncker, who said, and this same year comes up, Germans in 1912, just like Nefertiti, he's in there saying Africans were not even in the vicinity, and came around much, much later. The first appearance of the Negroes in history. He said they didn't come around into the 18th dynasty. And that is the man's argument. So that's what's happening, folks. And these are some of the greater forgeries. I can point out a lot of other, because I have hundreds of these, and that's not an exaggeration. But I wanted to show the more prominent images that are peddled out there over and over and over again. And then finally, take a look. You got it's always a nose job somewhere.
Yeah, I've
and
seen that one. That was ridiculous.
This is Thutmose the third. So he's had some plastic surgery, and they don't care that the stone doesn't match or putty doesn't match. That's not their issue. The issue is let's change the identity, and that's what we have here. And this is classic. And you know what? What's interesting is people don't even notice this because they're just waltzing through the collection, as opposed to taking time to look at and relook at every single piece. So this is why these museum officials and curators and restorers, they can peddle this nonsense and still keep a straight face. This is absurd.
I think sometimes they do notice, if I'm going to be totally honest. I think sometimes they do notice. Yeah, I think the guests do notice. And I think if it reinforces their, what they want to be true, that's why they're willing to turn a blind eye to it. Because I used to think, are they not seeing what I'm seeing? But then I realized actually there's a lot of willful ignorance going on in terms of the deception that takes place. They don't want to believe. There's a large amount of people out there that aren't neutral, that aren't out there to just say, okay, well, if they were black, they desperately do not want the ancient Egyptians to be a black civilization. And so they rely on and they cling on to these fakeries and the deception that takes place in the museums. That's personally what I feel like I've been observing. I feel like it's from the public, the reason you don't get outcries because they're quite happy at the deception that's taking place a lot of the time. Yeah,
you're right. They don't have any issue. They don't have an issue with it. Just like, am I the only one in the world that have noticed the paint dripping down Rahotep's neck?
So we just had a massive donation from Tracy. Thank you so much, Tracy. She says, I truly appreciate your expert illumination of the forgeries, Professor Ampim. I can't wait for the book detailing these discoveries. King, thank you for sharing your beautiful and meticulously researched reconstructions with us. Thank you for your support, Tracy. It's $100, and she's also one of my patrons, so I really appreciate it. Massive donation there, much appreciated. So yeah, sorry.
That's excellent. No, that's excellent. So now, next time I will share a little bit more, but I just want to introduce people to what's far more common than knocking off noses is to reshaping and recarving of noses. And so this is part of a whole avenue of sphinxes that link the Luxor and Karnak temples. This is a 1.5 mile long avenue of sphinxes. And you see one image after another that have been doctored up just in the last couple of years. So this avenue just finished 3 years ago. It was a grand ceremony to announce that the ancient route that linked these two temples in the Opet festival, one of the greatest festivals in ancient Kemet, that the route has now been restored. So I walked the entire way, and guess what? I'm noticing and did notice and document absolute modern ongoing criminal behavior, such as you notice where the crack is. This ain't no damn accident. A crack right across the face at the nose level. Now, the reason why this was done by the modern Arab workers and the supervisors and Egyptologists and others, they know exactly what's happening, but no one says anything. You're right. This cannot be unseen, but it's obvious. So why the crack? Because if you take a look at the profile view, this is the agenda to give it an aconine appearance. And so, but there's other things to see about this. I just wanted to introduce it because that's what's taking place in the field. So this is why I wrote about the vanishing evidence of classical African civilizations, which includes forgeries, reconstructions, reshaping, remolding of noses and lips, the stripping of paints. But it's a whole process to de-Africanize the images. So that's what people need to know. So I'm going to be taking folks to Kemet in Ethiopia. So if you're interested, you can contact me. We still have space for both trips, and so come join me because it's not a regular
Wait a
tour.
second, is that the end?
Yes.
Oh man, we're just getting into it. It's ready for another hour there. What's going on? Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, look, can I keep you for a few more moments and let's get some
Yes.
questions going? And because I think there was so much that was raised in that short presentation. It was amazing. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure people will be loading the comments of thanks for that excellent presentation. Gosh, there's so much that I could. Okay, let me think of something to ask because there's stuff that I wanted to ask, but I also want to give you the floor to talk. In fact, you know what? Let me go to the comments and see what's there. Let me see, rather than being selfish. Let me see if anyone's got anything there that's worth mentioning. Ra's been asking me to show Tomb TT175 since the start. I will. But I think in the context of today's show, let's revisit that, Ra, okay? He says an excellent tomb that has lots of dark-skinned Egyptians. I think we should definitely have a look at it. Maybe not in the context of today's show, just to kind of keep it on topic. But I've noted that now, and it looks amazing. I'd love to revisit that definitely in a future live stream, Ra. So I'm bookmarking that, and I'm not fobbing you off. I do want to have a look at that. Let's have a look. I just want to see, but feel free to fire questions as well, anyone else, in relation to the topic, and I'll see if I can find one.
Yeah, and why we're doing that. So the key is to know that there's a thriving forgery culture. It's very much thriving because now, because of the international pressure to repatriate a lot of the artifacts, is done more underground. So there's a forgery culture where it's fake and forged images, and the ones that I actually pointed out are the ones that are most prominent, because there's different ways to misrepresent information. A lot of times people know about just outright lies and inventions and forgeries, which is a healthy practice by conspirators. But beyond that, there's also information emphasis. So certain images are emphasized over and over and over again in order to promote that. And that is a way of distortion of just overemphasis. Another way of distorting the evidence, which the conspirators are very experienced at information suppression. So there's a lot of images, like I showed Hesse Ray, the first known dentist. How come that image is not front and center? How come that's not in the middle of the room? How come that's not on the exhibit catalog books and things like? Because he's too Africoid, too African, too strong, too powerful. So
I mentioned on the previous live stream that exact point. You showed the image earlier, the side profile view of Amenhotep III, and he had Queen T next to it. That stele of Amenhotep III that he showed. That's actually yeah. So that is actually in the Louvre. There's 3 of them, and in that cabinet they've got a few busts of Amenhotep III. And the reason I raised that is because there's another bust of Amenhotep III when his lips are really thick and he has a really broad nose. I mean, he looks like super, like there's just no ambiguity there. His nose isn't missing, his lips aren't missing, they're all there. But they don't keep that in that. They don't keep that in the Amenhotep III cabinet. They keep it elsewhere. So they have a cabinet specifically set aside for Amenhotep III busts, but the one that is unequivocally African and indisputably, when I say unequivocally African, I'm not saying the other ones are. I'm saying the one where it couldn't be anything else but an African, where there's no ambiguity whatsoever. They keep it separate. and it's literally right to the side of the museum. You could easily walk past it and not know that it was even a bust of a king. So yeah, just reinforcing the point that you were just making there, how it's very deliberate how they break these up and display them.
Absolutely. Yeah, how museums lay out their galleries is very important. Their descriptions or misdescriptions are very important. And like, for example, here's what some museums do. is that they will not deal with the history chronologically, which is the only way to keep things accurate in a proper time sequence. So instead of organizing exhibits based on a chronology, starting with the oldest artifacts first, like the Rosicrucian Museum here in San Jose, California, near San Francisco, what the Rosicrucian does, they're among the best in the world when it comes to distortion and misrepresentation. They don't deal with chronology. The Rosicrucian deals with they deal with categories, as some other museums. So in other words, if we just put all of the funerary material together, or just put all of the statues together, so you can have a statue from the foreign period of Romans next to a statue from somebody from the 18th dynasty, which is more than 1,000 years apart, and they have nothing in common. But if they just put everything in a general category, then the person won't even know that these statues have nothing to do with each other. The people are completely unrelated. This is completely different eras. In fact, Kemet is already gone and is old and gone when the Greeks and Romans come. There's no more dynasties at that point. How can somebody put a foreigner next to somebody who ruled during one of the golden ages? So it's ways in which they are able to misrepresent. The Louvre does it as well as anybody.
Yeah, sometimes with the Louvre, they didn't even have dates. That's the first time I came across that, because I thought even in the British Museum in Berlin there, they'll put the dates and the era. But in the Louvre, sometimes they'll just omit all information. It will just say, statue of a man. No date, no era, no dynasty, nothing. It's like pure guesswork about who this person is and what their significance was.
Yes, absolutely, which is a red flag. So, Sister, I guess Nuba, the trips. So the trip to Kemet, we actually have, I just heard from the travel agent, we actually have 2 more slots available. Now, those prices, by the way, are from New York. I know some of you are in the UK or elsewhere, so the prices would be a lot less. You would pay like, over $1,000 less, $1,300 less, because if you came, you would just have the land package only, starting in Cairo, Egypt. So for both the Kemet trip from June 8th to the 22nd, in Ethiopia, 25th to July the 10th, we go to 25% more sites and monuments than any other educational tour, 25% more. And because we're there not to shop and buy things, yes, we'll have time for that, but it's really to learn from the inside perspective of a primary or firsthand researcher. So I know the area that from an inside perspective. So at Kemet, for example, I'll just say really briefly, we go to 5 different type of locations. We go to pyramids, temples, tombs, ancient residential sites, and museums. Pyramids, temples, tombs, ancient residential sites, and museums. And so, 25% more with the Kemet tour. There's 2 slots that are open right now for Kemet that just became open. And then for Ethiopia, what makes the tour...
Just to be clear, really quickly, sorry, on that note, what are people getting? Will that cover everything? Will that cover accommodation and everything, or how does it work? Sorry, just so everyone's clear.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that, because that's a big point. Appreciate that. To make a quick point on that, some tours, many tours, let's be clear, they'll give a low price and then milk people along the way. So we don't do that. So the price, $5,400 for Kemet, it includes everything: airfare, domestic travel, tips, taxes, entry into all the fees. Into all of the monuments. So there's nothing more to pay. It literally covers everything, including all of the excursions. Whereas, other folks, and the accommodations are first class because we're doing a lot. So we want to make sure that people are able to relax, enjoy themselves when we go back to the hotel, so that everything's covered. There's nothing more to pay. Now, if somebody's from the U.S., it's from the Kemet trip is JFK is where the trip starts. We meet at JFK Airport, and then everything's covered. And as I said, nothing more to pay. Everything, including 2 meals a day, and that's it. And sometimes people might do lunch, but lunch doesn't cost anything. It's like $10, $12 if people want to eat lunch. Some people do, some don't. But so everything's covered. And plus, I'm out in the field giving people the unique insight at the archaeological locations and the museums as well. So,
Amazing.
and then I work only with one brother. I work with brother Abdul, who's a Nubian brother that we work closely together because he's the local brother there in Kemet who has the local guiding license. So we work hand in hand. And every evening we have a presentation where I review what we did during the day and then we preview the next day. And so last year we had 6 people that went the previous year. They came back. They wanted more. So and if somebody's older, I think your group brother Andrew might be a little younger, I suppose. Not everybody, but sometimes people might have a health issue. No issue. You know, if you got a cane, you need a wheelchair, you need to kind of sit on the bus for 1 hour, and no big deal, as long as you're there and you're learning. so we accommodate everybody, and then also I say, hey, on one day, not required, but if you really want to know what an archaeologist does, and bring your jeans or whatever, you know what? Let's go. We go into the unknown tomb. We're gonna crawl in there if you want, so you can really see. And that's kind of spectacular for some people because it's not like everything's cleaned off and and the rails are there and all the light. No. This, if you want, I would say usually with that tomb where we crawl in, we probably have maybe half the people go in, half stay out, either way. But it's fun, for me because I'm able to teach people what it takes if you really want to know from an inside perspective. Because there's nothing more important than primary research. So that's the Kemet trip. If you're interested, folks, you can contact me at manuampim at Gmail. We have 2 slots left now on the Ethiopia tour. That's special as well because it's 16 days. Most tours are 10 days, 12, maybe 15, but not 16. So for Ethiopia, the reason why we added 16 days, we're looking at the field work that I've been doing on ancient Kush. So Ethiopia, most people that go to Ethiopia, they go to the northern areas. They go to Aksum, which is the capital. They may go to I'm sorry, not Addis Ababa. Sorry, they go to the capital, Addis Ababa, the capital. They may go to Aksum, Bahadar, Lalibela with the famous churches, but they do what's called the historic route in the north. However, we go to the north, but what makes it totally different is we spend time in the Omo Valley. And the Omo Valley, that's a completely different Ethiopia. Those folks in the Omo Valley, they're not genetically linked to the folks in the north. They're closer in terms of their family biology and genetics. They're linked to the folks in South Sudan, northern Kenya, and Uganda. So the Omo Valley is one of the most special regions in the world where you have cultures that have not, literally they have not changed. It's like what you see is what you get. And it's amazing because as a primary researcher, I'm bringing, all of my years of study and field research, but I'm watching and learning from the rituals, the ceremonies, talking with chiefs and elders and a group of people that they call heroes to learn about their cultural lifeways. So we go to the Omo Valley because it's one of the most special places anywhere in the world where the cultures have not changed very much at all. So we combine both the northern historical route, which has value, but the unique Omo Valley. And I have, we have special contacts because when I'm meeting with folks in these very remote areas, we have access to the most important people. And one of the things I would say is my colleague, brother Andu Alam. I know it's early morning there in Ethiopia, but if you're watching, brother, you know that we understand it. And so I use my colleague's phrase from Ethiopia, brother Andu Alam. He's because at first when we started some years ago, we used to just talk with the translators, and we later found out that wasn't good enough because the translators in the Omo Valley, they're good folks, but they have broken information, as he would say. That's the best way to put it. So we go beyond the translators. They're still useful for us, but we talk only with the chiefs, the esteemed elders, and the heroes, because they have full information, and that's what we're able to add to the tour because it's our personal content that we have for Ethiopia. So anyway, that's how the tours work. And again, you can contact me at manuampim@gmail about either of the tours. But Kemet, there's 2 spaces left.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just want to give a shout out to Truth Peas, donated €50. Thank you very much, sir. He says, your incredible work is crucial to our liberation and achieving past greatness once more. So thank you so much. It's a really generous donation. Obviously, a lot of appreciation for your amazing work here, Professor. Get the likes up, like McFack said. We had a couple of good questions, actually, that I do want to fire your way. Sorry if I do miss over you. Mika's asked a question which I thought was quite interesting. She said, have you ever received any kind of threats because of the exposing frauds and forgeries? Does it ever get hairy? I'd imagine, do they know you in Cairo?
Well, I've been going since 1990, and I've been exposing Hawass for many years as a fraud and a phony. But you know what happened? What I would say is not really an issue, but what is becoming more of an issue is the people are more entrenched now to make sure that they can spread propaganda and not have a counter to it. So in other words, these folks now are more aggressive to just spew out ridiculous, crazy ideas. And when I tell my group, when we're in the Valley of the Kings, I'm talking without hesitation or reservation. And like I told one of the guides, I'm a professional historian. I can guarantee you that slavery is over. Nobody will tell me what to say. So if there, is issues, then whatever, let's rise up and make it happen, because I'm not going to stop and presenting. But it is more of an issue now. When they had said that they were concerned that I have a room to speak with my group. Why does he want to speak with his group? He's causing racial problems. And then the guy said, no, that's some other people. That's not Professor Manu. This is what he does as a historian. He's at archaeological sites. So they were trying to intimidate. And I, you know what I did? I invited all of them. I said, you know what? Tell all of them to come to my presentation and sit down and be quiet. And if they got a challenge, I want them to offer the challenge in the meeting. I don't want to hear no nonsense later.
Yeah.
That they went to tell the supervisor, who told the regional manager, all that. I don't want to hear any of that. Challenge me right there.
Exactly.
So, but no one's going to stop me, because no one is there talking rubbish. Documentation beats conversation. Bring your best.
Let's have it out in the open.
yeah, exactly. Bring your best. We'll duke it out in public. I'll hand your behind to you on the platter. There's 3 steps. Number 1, you beat the behind. Number 2, you take it off. And number 3, you give it to them as a gift with a bow and ribbon. And I'm willing to do that anywhere, anytime. So yes, there is more tension, but that's the nature of the work. So rise up. Rise up.
Got a question from Tracy. She says, what do you think of Hawass's replacement? I don't know too much about them. Are you aware of them, and are they what's the energy like from?
Well, you know what happened, folks. Some of you may be aware. You can look up this character. Hawass is a fraud, but beyond that, he was the head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, and he's the one that would take permits away from archaeologists just because they had a different opinion. He'd take away their permits. But with the Arab Spring, on the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, I don't know too much about the replacement, but I do know that the Supreme Council of Antiquities has not changed its agenda. They've doubled down on the misrepresentation of Kemet. So because the reason why it's not really it's a difference to a degree. No one can be as self-promoting as Hawass, but the problem is that the official name of the country is the Arab Republic of Egypt, and they do not consider themselves as a part of Africa. You got Egypt, and then you have, as they see it, Africa, and that's how it's promoted. So and they have no problem with typically with the propaganda that's presented. So nothing's changed dramatically. So like Rahotep and Nofret, they're going to remain in the middle of the museum floor until my work comes out. We'll create controversy around that. And a lot of the descriptions and things like that. Oh, by the way, if the man who replaced Hawass was doing his job, those artifacts that are currently being altered and de-Africanized, how come that hasn't stopped? That's very, very obvious that the public can see. I even saw one of the temples, the public actually stopped. Now, I'd never seen this in decades. The public, there were members of the public that stopped at a temple, literally, and they watched a man literally banging out images on a temple wall, destroying it. You know, he had like a sledgehammer, just angry. And people normally don't stop because they figure that, well, it couldn't be what it looks like. This obviously has to be from restorers or people conserving things. No, they're not conserving; they're destroying. So yes, that
were they working there, or were there angry locals?
No, they're working there. Hey, Brother Andrews, both. They're working there as angry locals. They're working there as angry locals because only anger. So I'm sitting there. I said, "Wow, they're more obvious than normal in destroying images." And but that's what takes place in broad daylight. And I photographed, recorded, and even kept some of the physical evidence, the artifacts as physical evidence. I've even done that, but it continues because there's not enough people that address the issue. So one thing I would say too, lastly, Hawass is making a comeback.
Great.
He was kicked out by the archaeology students. They said that he was selling them a bill of goods. They were getting their degrees in their PhD degrees in archaeology, and there was no work. That's why they ran him out. Plus when there was the Arab Spring or the Egyptian Revolution in 2011, the other thing was that Hawass claimed that when the Cairo Museum was broken into, nothing was stolen. When things were stolen, he allowed the criminals to get away because he said everything was fine. So when they found out that a bunch of items were stolen and archaeology students were already upset, they ran Hawass out. That was in 2011. But he's made a comeback in the last couple of years. He did a lecture series last year, miseducating people in dozens of cities across the country. And his replacement is not as arrogant and flamboyant as him. So he can't really stop Hawass, nor has he changed the direction of how they do business. So I don't see much change.
I mean, I'm surprised, frankly. It's not like he was I don't know. He doesn't come across as the sharpest representative they could have picked. I know that sounds like a bit of a low, but I'm just being honest with you. I've never been particularly impressed by his presentation. He's very passionate, yes, but he just comes across to me as like a zealot. That's the impression. That's the kind of energy I get from him. I've never had an aha moment where he's revealed something that's been it's always been some kind of dubious thing that he's proclaiming. You know, pulls a mummy out of the sand and then proclaims it's some queen or something like that without any form of evidence to support it. That's always been his modus operandi from my perspective. So yeah, I'm not impressed by him.
You're right. You're right. 100%. 100%.
$5 donation for Surfactant. It says, apologies for missing the stream. I will not be able to make this year's Kemet/Ethiopia tours. Will there be one next year? And it said, TKM, peace, brother. Peace, Surfactant. Thank you very much for your very generous donation. $5. Thank you very much. Any plans for next year? Yeah, I know it's a bit early to ask, but is that happening or is it a break year?
Yeah, for next year, we'll do 3 tours. Next summer, one will be to Kemet. Second, then after the Kemet tour, there will be the tour to Ethiopia, and then I'm adding a brand new location, and that's part of the work this summer. Is we're opening up the area of South Sudan. So that's going to be very, very special to South Sudan because that's where we find out about cultural ceremonies and cultural practices and ideas that link even more directly to ancient Kush. You know, and the people in South Sudan, they have Kush Bank, Kush Airlines, and so they know about Kush, but they don't, have the connection to antiquity. And that's why we have such a great relationship, because I'm learning about the cultural ways currently, and then they're learning and we're connecting about the past. But that'll be next year. Kemet, Ethiopia, and then South Sudan. So folks can email me and get on the list if
That's
you like.
amazing. $10 donation from Carol Asbarom. Thank you very much. That's really generous. No comment left, but it's much appreciated. Can I just ask you on the subject of Kush, which volumes would you recommend? Because I've always found it quite difficult to find books on Kush, and I know Nubia is separate, but even the same issue I've had with Nubia and Kush, finding actual decent volumes around those civilizations is really difficult. Have you found some good resources that you'd recommend to the community?
You know, what I would recommend actually is the classics. I recommend the classics because the new writers, they're just just Egyptologists writing about Kush and mixing and mingling Kush and Nubia. They don't know what they're writing about. And even the group that calls themselves Nubiologists, they're just as confused because they follow George Reisner and his confusion. So I don't recommend the current writers. If somebody wants to ask me about maybe particular scholars, that's your question, but then I can give you feedback. But Kush is basically misrepresented. So I would deal with the classics. For example, Chancellor Williams, in his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, he had a very good understanding of Kush, although he and most other people called it Ethiopia, but he's referring to Kush because of his field work in the 1950s in 26 countries and among 105 different language groups. Dr. Chancellor Williams is a researcher. So I would recommend his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, because he understood what others didn't seem to understand as I've gone through the archaeological records. I would also recommend the work of the work of William Leo Hansberry. Hansberry didn't write himself, but one of his students, Joseph Harris, took the lecture notes and the research notes of Hansberry. And so the writing, it's called the William Leo Hansberry African History Notebook. I would recommend that for sure. And I would recommend, since you have it in your library, the work of John Jackson, his small pamphlet, Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization. It's a very small pamphlet from the 1930s. And then also the work of Drusilla Dungy Houston, The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire, and 2 volumes of her series have been found. Now, these are classics, but I would rather you have the classics understanding, and then to that, I would say, look at what I've written. You can go to my YouTube channel, Manu Ampim, Professor Manu Ampim, and I did a couple of a 3-part series on Kush, and I coined the term Kushology. I coined that term to define my ongoing field work. So I would say, along with the classics, it'd be good to look at my videos. And one other thing, my book, A History of African Civilizations, I have a section on Kush, so I would recommend that as well. My book, A History of African Civilizations, because that's not all, but it's part of my ongoing work in the field of Kushology. And there's other materials that I would kind of caution about, really, to be honest with you.
Okay. Just sharing your website. Thank you. Where can I learn? Thank you for the $10 donation from Science and Inspiration. And they've asked the question, where can I learn about color symbolism in Kemet? And where can I learn about Germans and Vandals defacing statues? So I think you mentioned that book earlier, The Lie Became Great. That would be a good one for the defacing. Anything on color symbolism in terms of books, or even resources, but maybe not on books? Any thoughts? I did a video, but I'm sure you've watched that already.
So I think you did that last week, right? Or a couple last week, right?
Yeah, I've covered it somewhat, but just not broadly speaking, but yeah, I've kind of just touched on the subject.
Yeah. Let me see. There's the main thing on the color symbolism. That's what. Okay. Well, on the color symbolism, then if you look at anything, there's a couple of works. Let me see if I can remember, because I don't really rely on this stuff very much. Honestly, it's my own field work.
Yeah, you're out there. You're doing the primaries, so
yes. So what I would say, a couple of things. One is on the symbolism, then anything dealing with the Valley of the Kings would be a great source. So there is so the late Kent Weeks. Kent Weeks, I actually referred to him earlier on X-ray interference, but they have it's called the Theban, like for Thebes, the Greek Theban Mapping Project. The Theban Mapping Project is really good because what they've done over the decades, he and his colleagues with the Theban Mapping Project.com is really look at the text and the images from all of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and tombs of the nobles to really map the entire area. And you can see how they use the color symbolism when you look at all of those resources. You can do it elsewhere in the country, but that's an area where you can concentrate on the symbolism of the color, of using black, like Asar, for example. They call them. The term is Kim Ware, or the Great Black. Or the Great Black One, and there's different descriptions because we say Kemet, which means black land, land of black people, but Kemet, the root Kim means black, and they use that root in a way that's very important because it also means complete. Black also means complete, not just. Excuse me. Kim also means complete, not just black. So if folks, and then they call Asar Kenti Amenti, the one who's foremost of the West, and they present him in black, which is in many cases, but he's the complete one. He's the one that reigns over the spirit realm. He's the one that reigns over the duat, the place of spiritual transformation. So I think if you look at those tombs and so forth, and then some of the explanations that are given, that's one angle that I would take because it really gives you a lot of great details about the use of the black, the use of green, and what deities and what context they're using those colors, which is very, very important. So either the colors are used to represent skin tone, or you're right, there's a symbolism as well. So that distinction has to be made. But the Theban Mapping Project, or I think if you go to KV, like I mentioned, Kings Valley, KV5, just the number 5.com, you should be able to link to all of the other tombs as well. KV5 should be able to do that. Things change, but that should get you there. And I would recommend that. And the other thing is Odomati Lucas.
Oh, yes, it does. Yeah.
It does.
So
okay.
KV5.com takes you to the Theban Mapping Project. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that for sure. And then too, these are great questions. Just so folks are aware, as a research approach, books are okay, but scholars don't focus just on books. We focus on scholarly studies because there are far more studies and articles that come out in much more quantity than books. And a lot of times the books are comprised of a series of writings that someone had made along the way. So what we look for is scholarly journals and someone who's produced a important article, but it doesn't necessarily turn into a book. I saw the other question, my brother, about how much have I written on, I think, the forgeries. I haven't worked on the project in terms of publishing it. Yeah, I haven't worked on it in terms of publishing. There's nothing more for me to know other than who said what in recent years, just so I can do a quick literature search. It's not to learn from them, because I know the artifacts. It's just that we don't have a team, an army of people doing the work. That's all it comes down to. And because I teach, I travel, I research, I write, I'm in the community, I'm in the trenches. It's just one of those things. But I'm talking about it in more detail than I have in some years because I want to push to get this done and published because I believe that the publishing of modern fraud will help to shift the entire discipline to make a monumental impact. I'm convinced of that, and so that's why I'm excited about it, even though I know you're supposed to be waiting for it for a while. So keep the pressure on.
We look forward to it. Timeline Scrolls Collection said color symbolism resources Egypt revisited. You mean this one over here? Stays on my desk. You said chapter 4. I'm gonna have a quick look. That's me flexing. This is one of my first books. Absolutely love it. Yeah, I'll see. I'm gonna have a look at that chapter 4 and tell you what I come up with. But it says here that the contents is blackness and and human images in ancient Egyptian art, page 55. There you go. Give page number as well.
You know what? I remember. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you're right. That's not a bad article. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, speaking about the late Van Sertima, that issue Egypt Revisited, that's a part of the Journal of African Civilizations, which was the most important journal on African civilizations in the second half of the 20th century, if not the entire 20th century, published from 1979 to 94. So Egypt Revisited. Yeah, thanks for sharing that that resource. The last book that was written.
They said then that you know them.
In the Journal of African Civilization series, edited by.
Sorry to cut you off. I didn't got a delay there.
What's the name?
Enoch Hankerson. Name ring a bell?
Enoch. Yeah, yes, I know.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, I do. And the last book edited by Van Sertima in the Journal of African Civilization series was in 1994, and it's Egypt, Child of Africa. And I have two essays in there, including one on the Rahotep and Nofret forgeries. That's the last one, folks. So if you can get Egypt, Child of Africa, that's a classic because it's the last one edited by Van Sertima in 1994.
Okay, that's getting bought tonight. Child of Africa, brilliant.
And yes, I will go live more often. You know, I'm on Facebook and I have a channel. But here, what I appreciate working with my brother here. So the theme is modern fraud. That's the theme. So our episodes. This is episode number 2. We're dealing with different aspects of modern fraud because there's a whole nother level to the systematic stripping of paint. And because I'll introduce you to the dark legs, colorless face phenomena. Dark legs, colorless face, where you look at a relief and the original paints are still there by the ankles and calves. But as you go up the knee, the thigh, the upper torso, paint is missing because most people don't look at the upper body and face so much. And I've spent hours and hours and hours in galleries, not just studying the artifacts, but studying the people that walk in and look at the artifacts just to see what they're looking at and how they're being impacted. So there's different levels. So modern fraud is the overall theme, but there's different aspects of it. And so that's something to know.
It will be, that will be amazing to have that broken down. RJ McKenzie has just asked a question for you. Do you have any plans to visit the Kunstgeschichte Museum in Vienna?
In Vienna. I've been there. I've been to every collection, literally, because when I lived in, I was actually based in London in '89 and '90, and I went to that. And all of the large, small institutions all over Europe. Yes, I did 11 country research tour over a year, and that museum there, that's the one that I was referring to earlier, where these suckers have reversed the chronology. So when you go in, you're looking at the foreign period, the Arab, the Roman, the Greek, the Persian, the Assyrian, and then you got to go to the back of the gallery when you're already tired to see the original African founders of Kemet. That's deliberate. There's no way they can be that dumb and ignorant. If somebody did that in my classes, then they may get a C minus, but that would be very generous because that's failing. Chronology means you have to present things in a proper chronological order, starting with the oldest first, and that museum doesn't do that. And by the way, I wrote the series, The Vanishing Evidence of Classical African Civilizations, dating back to 1994, to deal with this kind of fraudulent presentation. I think that might have been the third issue dealing with museums. I think it was temples and then tombs and museums. So
brilliant. I mean, I don't know how much time we've got. There's a load more questions.
I'll take them.
Here's a statement. I feel like I just put this on the screen. Professor Manu should go live more often. So that's you're very welcome on this channel anytime you like. I think we have a good time every time you're here. And you obviously have more topics to cover as well. We focused in on this modern frauds, but that's kind of like my favorite topic because of what I do. But I think we could definitely do something different next time you're on the channel. And everyone will enjoy it the same way.
You know what, brother, the reconstructions you do, we can deal with the systematic color stripping, color lightening, and also why was it that forensic reconstruction became popular? It became popular, it became popular with Hawass and others because that's the only way they can get around the evidence.
Yep.
For example, why would there be a need to reconstruct Tutankhamun? There's not. There's literally hundreds of images of him. Why would there need to be a need for reconstruction? Because that's what gives the modern propagandist an opportunity to change his identity. Because the artists were very clear about his identity. And so, as well as many other images, many images. So there's ways to get around facts when people perform intellectual somersaults and acrobatic moves and cartwheels so they can jump over the evidence and reach an illogical, irrational conclusion. That's what takes place. But looking at how the paints are done, I would love to really discuss that, as well as the alteration of noses and lips and their and those kind of things. They are done in such quantity, people will be shocked that that's far more than noses being knocked off, because it changes the look. And I even didn't notice some things when I was at the British Museum. And that's why I like to take new people sometimes, because they have a fresh view. And even if they don't know the evidence, they might make a comment that's so far out in left field. I'm trying, how can you make that comment? I look and I see something that I hadn't seen before.
I mean, just in support of what you're saying, I always speak about on this channel about the fact that they really rely on essentially sidestepping anthropology when it comes to ancient Kemet to relate it to Europe or relate it to Eurasia. So they don't like to deal with any of the actual disciplines of anthropology that you actually deal with, and they're supposed to deal with, physical anthropology. They steer clear from doing any kind of anthropometrics, measurements, because they know they all come back unequivocally African. They steer clear of any linguistic anthropology because they'll just get back African languages. They steer clear of cultural anthropology because they just get back African culture. And the only thing they like to focus in on are these really hypothetical studies, things that they basically can run their own conclusions. This is one of the reasons why there's so much heavy weighting towards interpretation of genetic data. Let's use these markers and carve a path back to Eurasia, or carve some kind of tenuous link to the modern populations of North Africa and blah 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 blah. They'll find ways of skewing that data in their favor. And like you just said, with the forensic facial reconstructions, the faces on the statue isn't good enough, and they haven't made a single attempt. This is what would be logical to me. if you're going to do forensic facial reconstruction, we've been through the process on my channel many times now. It's very much an art. It's very much subjective, and it's exponentially more effective when you use reference material. They know that already, but not a single forensic artist has come along and said, let me, using the skull and using the body, try to make the statue. No one's used the statues, the hundreds of statues of Tutankhamun that all look like the same young boy, as a reference to then try and build his face. It's always been like, well, we can't use any of that. Zahi Hawass and co. What ethnicity did you say he was? Yeah, he was an Arab. Okay, cool. We'll use that data. That's literally how it goes. So it went like that with the Carolyn Wilkinson reconstruction. It went like that with the Elizabeth Danes reconstruction. They all referred to the Egyptian antiquities to decide what the ethnicity was before they started. They didn't use their own expertise to say, based on this Nilotic skull, this is clearly a young African boy. They'll prefer to get some quasi data from the Egyptian antiquities and then build their reconstruction based on that. And that's what they deal with. They deal in hypotheticals. They don't deal in the actual, the core tenets of their actual fields, which I just find typical.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, folks have to be careful, and you're right. It's forensic artists, not forensic scientists, because
absolutely,
because science comes from the Latin word "scire," which means to know, and they don't know. That's why, like you say, it's a lot of, like I show images where Tutankhamun is back in 1983. He's presented one way. 2002, he's two different races. I could imagine the same guy be two different races, you know, based on the perception of the artist. And one of the artists in Australia, he was making an image of himself. This ain't King Tutankhamun. This is him. It looks just like.
They do that a lot. They do that a lot. They did that with Cheddar Man recently. I showed my channel community the people who did the reconstruction of Cheddar Man, and it's like their black brother. So it's two artists who are brothers, and it looks like triplets. It just looks like they got a third person and then just painted him in chocolate. It's just like, yeah, well, this is Cheddar Man's reconstruction. I was like, come on, you guys can't be serious. This is ridiculous. You've just made your own face. Oh dear. I've had a super chat from Mahaka again. Thank you, Mahaka Zulu again. Is the United Nations illegal option to pursue crimes against antiquities and humanity?
Illegal option? Well, I don't know what you mean, but there's well, you know, there's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was issued in December of 1948, and UNESCO and United Nations, you know, they refer to that quite a lot. And UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO is really the international body that deals with antiquities, and they're the ones that, when presentations are made, decide that a site or artifacts, or that they're World Heritage artifacts and things like that. But then the UN has the High Commissioner on Human Rights. But I mean, the UN wouldn't go after artifacts to, I guess, maybe return them. I think that's what you may be talking. I'm not really sure, but they certainly have upheld principles that should operate among the human community, and they definitely have done at least a job theoretically to present what should be the ground rules, even though the U.S. and other countries don't follow them. And besides, the British Museum and their criminal disposition is that they say they don't want to give back any of the artifacts. You have the Greek government, the Nigerian government, all of the different governments, Ethiopian government, they want their stuff back from the British Museum. The British Museum has two positions. Number one, they say that it's against our laws to return. Well, what laws were in place when you stole this material?
Sorry, I know I shouldn't laugh, but it just smacks of British arrogance. I'm telling you, it's when you the responses that the British government give in these kind of situations is always textbook. It's like they just do not give a crap. It's like, no, give us our stuff back, please. No, we don't want to. Sorry, we'll be keeping that. Thank you.
We're the British. We're the British. We're the haughty British. We don't do that. So they claim that it's against their laws. What? Well, what laws were in place when you stole it? And then they also have a backup plan. They say that we're better caretakers. And guess what? In the British Museum, those of you who are in London or close by, you check it out. You got artifacts in the gallery downstairs that are not behind glass, is not protected, and it's discolored now because it's eroding. Because when people go to take a picture next to a statue, 90% of the people do it. We have dirt and oil on our hands. What do? They want to touch the artifact and lean back and look cool so that they can take the picture. And I pointed out to folks when I led a tour through the British Museum, this was some years ago, I said, this is absurd. I said, look at this. These artifacts are discolored. Notice the dark coloration because it's eroding because of all the dirt and it's beginning to erode. So I went over to the security and told him, you need to stop these ridiculous tours from damaging these artifacts. And besides, they need to be behind glass. He said, yeah, you're right, but we don't have enough staff. Well, I'll close the damn gallery then and respect African artifact. You don't have enough staff.
They don't care.
They don't care. And the bottom line is this. We got it. What you going to do about it? We're the British. So you want to take it? What you going to do? That's their basic position, really. They come
very gangster
with all this other stuff. And it's like, what you going to do about it? That's their main position. But the United Nations, it's 100% British gangsterism. That's what it's about. And
I mean, I've lost faith in the United Nations since obviously UNESCO allowed the flooding of, I mean, they sat back and watched that. If anything, co-signed it, which I just think, well, you lose faith in, you kind of, you grow up and you have faith in these institutions, and then you learn about the kind of things they've done to African antiquity. Then you're kind of like, well, yeah, it just feels like there's no one on our side when it comes to these things. This is why I keep pushing for us to have our independent determinism when it comes to the future of our history. I am not in any way, shape or form positive about finding some kind of happy middle ground when it comes to the people who have been custodians of our history for so long and doing nothing but destroying it. I really am not. I'm just like, we just need literally to do our own thing. I can't see it working any other way. I know it sounds really pessimistic, but that's just the way it is. I think some people have got their mindset that we gotta come to some kind of happy middle ground where they change up all of the global curriculums and they start to, I'm like, yeah, I haven't got time. I haven't got time for that. It's a short life, and we got stuff to do. Nerd Large has made a $10 donation. I'd like to get your reflection on that, what I just said as well, by the way, if you agree or disagree. He said, for their DNA analysis, they don't dare to do full autosomal DNA analysis on those 17th and 18th dynasty pharaohs and queens when they had the mummies. Absolutely. And they can do it now with next generation sequencing. They could get, I mean, if they can pull DNA from like Cheddar Man, they can definitely pull DNA from their 17th and 18th dynasty. Those mummies are definitely preserved well enough to get a full autosomal sequence from them. And I don't think they will do it. Like I said, I think Zahi Hawass was petrified by what we were able to pull from those little bit of STR loci that he released. I think it terrified him, and he said, yeah, never again. No, we're never going to let them see anything that comes out of these dynastic mummies again.
Well, that's absolutely the case. That's why they weren't published in 2010, because it would contradict and blow up a lot of their superficial positions, just making up things about relationships that don't make any sense. What makes sense is to study African cultural practices today that are very, very, very similar. Because it's always amazing when I'm in the field and I'm among the indigenous communities in the Omo Valley and also parts of the Nile Valley. They've never seen a lot of these images that we may show, but yet they have a detailed assessment and analysis of it because it's the same cultural practices that they practice today, even though the images from antiquity are new, but not the images that they are looking at, like the colors and things that they are wearing in rituals and ceremonies. That's what's special. Yeah, that's what's very special. So yeah, it's clear that the United Nations is limited because the U.S. can veto votes, and they can veto even if the most of the world agrees or wants something to happen. You got a few countries that can veto everything, so it does become a joke for sure. Yeah. So
indeed, agree. Talia, thank you for your $20 donation. Says, thank you, gentlemen. It's so important that we know about the fraud and ongoing forgeries of the ancient Egyptian artifacts and culture, the indigenous ancient Africans. Thank you so much, Talia, for your generous donation. One of many. Much appreciated. And thank you for that statement as well. Yeah, well, let's put this one up, actually. It says, one of the best ways to promote the truth about real history of ancient Kemet, Egypt, is to share videos and channels like this. So yes, please. That's a really good, I think, a good point for us to close on from Valentine Okolo. So share, please do share this. This has been really enlightening presentation, as seems to always be the case with Professor Ampim. I'm looking forward. I think we'll, after this live stream ends, we'll maybe schedule another one. I'm bearing in mind though he's got some trips coming, so the next one might be a little while out. All depends what we can squeeze in, but we'll definitely have him back on the channel very soon. Please show your appreciation, like it up, and say something positive in the chat. Professor Ampim, are you happy to wrap it up at this stage, or you look like you're chilling?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we made the point on forgeries and gave people enough foundation to move forward. So I think we're good, and folks are contributing, which is great. So I think we'll be ready for the next episode where we'll uncover another dimension of this broad topic of fraud, so people can have a grand perspective on it. Yes,
thank you, Professor, and we look forward to that. $2 donation from HD says they would never keep their own ancestors on display or dismember them in the way that I don't, and I think that's true. I don't think they would. I think their treatment and their disdain towards the arts and the artifacts and the graves and the resting places of the ancient Egyptian tells me everything I need to know about that civilization. They treat it with the same disdain that they treat us. So it makes it obvious who they think they are. That's
absolutely.
kind of, yeah,
absolutely. And in fact, we know that they won't do that because they don't do it to their own ancestors. So it's all despicable and really ridiculous. So we just have to make sure people know what's happening, and they help spread the word and do what they can to support what you're doing. And again, folks, there's nothing like being there in person, getting a firsthand view. And also keep in mind that there's no such thing as one day on the calendar. One day doesn't exist, or someday it doesn't exist, because all I know is that you never really know. Like in 10 years, we had two major things. We had the Arab Revolution in Egypt in 2011. And everybody remembers that around March or so of 2020, COVID stopped everybody from traveling for a while. So there's no such thing as every year. I do plan to go to Kemet, Ethiopia, and South Sudan next year, but you never know. But one thing about it, if some unbelievable research opportunity comes up, like there's one of the most important rituals that could be held, and that's the only time that's going to be done, guess what? I'm going to the ceremony, the ritual, because that's where you learn at another level. But we are planning to do the tours, but you never know in the future. So, but my brother,
the tour. Can I just plug the tour really quickly? If you're able to make There's 2 more spaces on the ancient Egypt tour, and I'd imagine there's a few more spaces on the Ethiopia tour as well. You know, if you can, I'm not going to plead with anyone here. If you can, I think the value that it's going to add to you is going to be immense. I'm still trying to logistically work out if I can make it. I would love to. So I'll be in contact directly with Professor Ampim. But if you can make it, the opportunity's there. You'll be missing out if you don't. It looks like it's going to be amazing. So
yes, sir.
Brilliant. A lot of people. Next year, I'm telling you, better leave a lot of spaces, because there's a whole bunch of people who are who are saying they're definitely going to be there for next year's one. So yeah. Brilliant. So I think we'll close it there then. Are you happy to close it there, Mr. Professor Ampim?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I think we did our task today, my brother. Appreciate it.
Oh, you did amazing. Thank you. I've just sat back and just learned a whole lot. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the channel. Thank you for joining us on the King's Monologue. Thank everyone who's been on the live stream. I think we were averaging, we're down to 370 now, but I think we were averaging around 430 for the entire stream, which is amazingly high numbers. Thank you for all of the generous people that donated. I really appreciate your donation. It's it's very I do rely on them, and I appreciate every single one of them. And thank you to everyone who's just taken the time to actually be involved in the live stream. The comments are part of the massive amount of motivation that we feel bringing and being able to discuss this. If we didn't see you interacting in the way that you interact, it would be a much more boring live stream. So yeah, we really appreciate all of the usual suspects and everyone else. If there's people that are new, I appreciate you for taking the time to join us on a live stream. And most of all, thank you to Professor Ampim for your amazing knowledge and the time that you took to develop that presentation.
My pleasure, my brother. That's part of the mission. And by the way, this is not my occupation; it's my vocation. So that's part of the work. Yes.
Well, we appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. Yeah, I think we'll call it a day there. Thank you, everyone. People are saying it needs to be a regular stream. I agree. We'll chat. See where we can get you on next. And thank you, everyone who's joined. Have a fantastic afternoon/evening. Those of you in America, good night to those of you in the UK, London, and Europe. And yeah, and I'll see and good evening to my followers in Africa, and I'll see everyone again soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.